HPXLOTM. Please call me Mr. Error by author Hoyne_Kyoma. Chapter 201 to 230. The next day began just like any other, except this time, once again, most students in the castle had fallen sick. However, this time, the sickness was exceptionally prevalent and several students suffered bouts of vomiting and fever. Loki felt something trip the ward he'd set up in the random classroom, so he quickly abandoned breakfast to get Sirius's letter for him. The letter was short and didn't even contain a salutation. I received a letter and a parcel from the Aurora Order. Have you gotten any news about Peter Pettigrew yet? Ignoring Sirius's question, Loki pulled out the second letter, the one from Aurora Order, and began to read it carefully. I have included the first half of the payment, 50 galleons, in the package for half of the information. I have a new task for you. Leave with Gehrman Sparrow the item that is inside the package. Loki looked at the 3 short sentences that were on the letter with a little disappointment. He was careful enough not to let any information slip from his plan. But I did get a weird item that I have to give to myself. Perhaps I can analyze it better and learn something about all this by understanding what it is supposed to do. Loki stuffed the package into his pocket and decided he would examine its contents later. He quickly walked back to the Great Hall and slipped back into the crowd of students waiting to be escorted to their classes by a teacher. His first class of the day was herbology and Loki was escorted there by the herbology professor Miss Pomona Sprout. The classes went swimmingly well and Loki eventually moved to a random empty classroom ready to examine the package he had been given. Opening the package, Loki found a large stuffing of newspaper that surrounded a simple bronze canute. Pulling out his wand immediately, Loki separated the newspapers from the coin using a simple levitation charm and placed it on the table for him to examine. Loki observed the coin from all angles for a while as he tried to see if he could spot anything weird about it, but there seemed to be nothing life-threatening. But Loki wasn't convinced just yet. Pulling out his topaz pendant, Loki performed his first divination of the day. The coin is a Beander item. The coin is a Beander item. The coin is a Beander item. Comma. The coin is a Beander item. Loki opened his eyes and looked at his pendant. It was spinning clockwise rapidly. Then he stopped the pendulum and performed his second divination. It is safe for me to touch it? Loki asked 7 more times, and opening his eyes he got his answer. The pendulum was spinning anti-clockwise slowly. So dangerous, but still something I can handle. I see. Then Loki moved on to his third divination. I can examine this item by wrapping it in my spirituality. Loki stilled the pendulum and asked it a new question 7 times. Opening his eyes, Loki looked at the pendulum with a slight apprehension since he needed this to have a positive response. He needed to be able to use his spirituality to interact with the item so that he could examine the runes that were used in making it, so that he could learn exactly what the item was supposed to do once it came in contact with him. It was a crucial step to understand how he could defend himself and learn more about this mess he was in. As soon as Loki's eyes lay on the pendulum, his heart sank. The pendulum was spinning anti-clockwise, rapidly. Rapid enough to stir up a small breeze. So definitely not, huh? Taking a deep breath in to calm himself and analyze the situation more carefully, Loki looked at the coin that was in front of him. After a few seconds, he used his divination to ask another question. There is a way to safely touch the coin with my spirituality to examine it. There is a way to safely touch the coin with my spirituality to examine it. There is a way to safely touch the coin with my spirituality to examine it. Comma. There is a way to safely touch the coin with my spirituality to examine it. Loki opened his eyes and looked at the pendulum in his hand. It was spinning clockwise. His heartbeat sped up and a smile emerged on his face. So, I can do it. I just have to figure out how. I see. I see. With his mood back on track, Loki did a fourth divination to figure out an answer to a question he had. I can use spirit vision to examine the coin. I can use spirit vision to examine the coin. I can use spirit vision to examine the coin. I can use spirit vision to examine the coin. Comma. I can use spirit vision to examine the coin. His answer was simple. The topaz pendulum spun around anti-clockwise. He couldn't. The phrase, "you must not directly look at a god," rang in Loki's mind, but he pushed it aside and performed his fifth and final divination. I can take this coin to the puzzle room without suffering any grave consequences. Loki asked the question 7 times and slowly opened his eyes. The pendulum was spinning anti-clockwise in a similarly rapid fashion. So that confirms it. The Aurora Order is planning to do something with the founders. Affect them perhaps. Or maybe even corrupt them and take control over them. With his old questions answered and new ones leading him in his search for more answers, Loki repacked the item into its original packing and carefully stuffed it into his pocket. After re-adding all the tape around the coin, Loki carefully wrapped it in small walls of spirituality so that no one would be able to detect what was inside the box, and any attempts at finding it using divination would be for naught. Walking out of the classroom, Loki began to go to the dungeons to go back into his dorms when, after turning around a bend, he knocked into someone. Ouch! Loki whispered, rubbing his nose that was hurt. Just as Loki was about to complain further, he saw the person brush past him as if he wasn't even there and continue walking at the same pace they were before. A piece of paper had fallen onto the floor and Loki bent over to pick it up. "Hey!" Loki shouted to return the piece of paper to the person, but he paused when he read what was on it. "Keep the item with you at all times. It will keep you safe from the sickness." Although the message did make Loki pause, really it was the handwriting that grabbed his attention. "Ah, it's Mr. X who wrote this letter. But, why is it with this girl?" Loki looked at the girl who was mindlessly walking the corridor and chased after her while tiptoeing and staying mostly silent. Once he was in front of her, he recognized her even though her eyes were blank and she appeared to be possessed. "It's the same girl who asked me about Gairman Sparrow, Mary Jackson. One of the girls hired as a mercenary to find me." Loki stayed silent, covering himself under illusions, and followed the girl through the corridors, occasionally taking out the Marauder's map to check if any teachers were around. But not so surprisingly, Loki could see the girl avoid all teachers who were on patrol, even Miss Norris and Peeves. Soon, there were 2 more people, both students, who were walking in a similar fashion with their eyes rolled back. Loki didn't have to use spirit vision to tell that they were all in the same state. But he did nothing to help them out of it, not because he was apathetic to their lives or he had a grudge against them for helping the Aurora Order, but simply because. "I'm no match to whatever entity is doing this." Loki was scared. His palms had turned sweaty and his lips dry. His throat was parched and he couldn't find it in himself to even try to stop what was happening. After all, when the great Adam couldn't realize that someone was working right under his nose, how could he, a measly Sequence 7 cryptologist, aim to defeat such a thing? Loki carefully watched them all step out of the Hogwarts castle and slowly make their way towards the Whomping Willow that did not react in any way to their presence. They vanished soon after, entering its roots. "Well, I know what the coin does now, I guess." Safely back inside his dorm room, Loki sat on his bed with a prominent frown on his face. What is it that the coin made them do? How did it possess them and make them go to the roots of the Whomping Willow? And why did it take them into the Whomping Willow in the first place? Is Sirius the one really behind all of this? No, that doesn't seem to be the case. Why would he have gotten captured by me if he could do such crazy things? And why would he play along with me to fight against the Aurora Order? On top of it all, why didn't the tree react to their presence? I've heard plenty of warnings from both Professor Sprout and Snape about its violent tendencies. Sigh. Loki dropped into his cushiony bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. He was losing hope. He was against an opponent he could not do much against, yet. Lampooning does nothing. Single quote. I should take this in smaller steps. I'm too eager and trying to jump to conclusions without laying down proper foundations. Yes, all knowledge is built only on solid foundations. Loki felt his potion react to the rule he just affirmed in his mind and digest by 1%. Bringing his potion to 42% digestion. Alright, let's take this slow and steady. Let's list all the things I know. Aurora Order is planning something and this something is closely tied to me for some reason, which is why they want to get rid of me. Except Aurora Order is also cooperating with a different organization or an entity, likely to be her, since it is related to plague and sickness, that is doing something which is closely connected to the founders. Maybe to accommodate their pathways and rise into a dual pathway god, or even an attempt at becoming a pillar. Perhaps it is trying to induce corruption in them, a side effect of which is students in the castle falling sick. And then there's Salazar Slytherin himself, who needs to be woken up from his slumber by placing something inside the bowl. The object that currently is my best guess is the Slytherin locket. Single quote. Complicated. Last but not least, I possess a coin that can take control over my will and send me into the Whomping Willow, from where I doubt I will ever return. Loki stared at the blank ceiling and began to wonder what he would do. If there's a person that can infect so many students at once, with or without the help of a Beyonder item, it stands to reason that they are at least a demigod. In such a scenario, the only people I can depend on are Professor Snape and, like it or not, Salazar Slytherin, who is asleep. If I choose Professor Snape, I won't need to explain him much, but I doubt the matter will only remain until him. I could claim that the hidden sage was pestering me with information about this case, but it would be risky, and I'm half sure Adam will be involved and he might learn my secrets, and I don't want to meet him anytime soon just yet. I don't know what he might do to me, or what plans he might wrap me in. It'd be very irresponsible of me to join hands with him when he can manipulate me into stabbing my own back somehow and kill myself. Okay then, the option of asking Professor Snape, or any of the other teachers for that matter, is out the window. So the only other option is to handle the matter by waking up Salazar Slytherin. There's not much else I can do if he decides to kill me after waking up, but given how he's acted so far, I guess I can only take the risk and wake him up. Especially since he might be able to help Walburga later. Then to wake up Salazar, I am in need of an artifact that I do not currently possess. The Slytherin locket. So my current aim is to find the locket. With his aim figured out, Loki wondered about the things corresponding to it. Can I divine the location of the locket? Loki immediately went above the gray fog so that no matter what he gazed upon, he'd still be protected by the Saphira Castle and not suffer any adverse injuries. With his sights set on the question, where is the Slytherin's locket? Loki began to perform a dream divination. A blurry vision of something, as if he was watching through a glass mosaic, came into view. Anti-divination. Loki tried to focus his vision and soon enough he could see something. A small dark cupboard came into view. The style and familiarity. The Black Manor. Inside the cupboard was a white cloth that was wrapped around an object. Because of how tightly it was wrapped, Loki could easily make out that inside it was an 8-sided item which was about an inch thick. But as soon as Loki tried to see anything else, he saw the object enwrapped in cloth quiver, causing the hair on the back of his neck to rise. Abort. Breaking out of the vision, Loki calmed himself down and took a few deep breaths before checking his body to see if anything was wrong with him. After he was satisfied that there was nothing wrong with him, he calmed down and left the Saphira Castle with a frown on his face. Loki wrote a quick letter to send the next morning before he fell asleep out of exhaustion. He was waiting to send the letter to Sirius because if there really was a demigod under the Whomping Willow, it was too dangerous to go anywhere near it, even in the spirit world. He divined to check if something would happen to Sirius, and when he found nothing too dangerous, he opted to just sleep and deliver the message the next day. Later the next day, Sirius opened the letter he had just received via a school owl from Loki. Don't use the path under the Whomping Willow. Get away from the Shrieking Shack as soon as possible and find somewhere else to hide. Something unspeakable is happening there, literally, and it would be in your best interest to move from there. Sirius became confused as he read the letter. Move away. But why? Sirius looked at the door that led out of the Shrieking Shack and pondered if he should just walk into the tunnel and see exactly what was going on. But then he stopped and thought about it a little more. Something unspeakable. Like you know who. A demigod. Sirius's face wore a frown and his brows furrowed. Tisk. Just as I was getting comfortable. He kicked a random piece of broken wood that was lying around on the floor and began to pack up his meager possessions. He had a stolen wand, the ring Gehrman Sparrow had given him, and a little bit of food he'd stolen as a dog from the residents of Hogsmeade. In London, inside the Black Mansion, Creature looked at the window where a familiar owl sat and snapped his finger to magically open it. "Master needs something," Creature asked, looking at Rowley, who was busy pecking on the bread crumbs he held in his hands. Creature untied the letter that was attached to Rowley's feet and unfurled the letter to begin reading it quietly. "Creature, I hope you have been able to contribute to keeping the Black family's name high by keeping the mansion clean. I would like you to do something for me. I want you to find any information you have on the whereabouts of the locket of Salazar Slytherin that exists in the Black family mansion. I am currently searching for the locket and need your help finding it. Again, I hope you are doing the Black family proud and working to the best of your ability. Loki." Creature's hands trembled as he read the letter, and the picture of an all-too familiar locket sprang up in his mind. "Master Regulus," Creature whispered unheard words as he brought his hands closer to his face and wiped the tears leaking from his eyes. "Is it time to reveal your secrets?" The breakfast in the Great Hall was stifling, but only for Loki. The 3 students he'd seen vanish into the Whomping Willow just the other day had reappeared in the Great Hall. They laughed and talked to their friends like nothing was wrong and ate a hearty meal. One of them looked slightly more pretty, but Loki didn't find it noticeable. How are they so normal? Did they not remember what happened yesterday? Loki's hands trembled as he remembered their eyes that had rolled to the back of their heads. If so, what happened to them after they vanished into the tree? Loki wanted to turn on spirit vision and examine them, but his mind warned him against it. They could still be holding the coin, and I don't want to get affected by whatever is in it. Loki spent the day attending classes with a heavy burden on his mind as he continued to think about what could have happened to them. What does the coin do exactly? How did it take over them and make them do things they don't seem to remember? Does it contain the will of an evil god? Like the one-eyed Jesus planted on Klein while in the forsaken land of gods to open the giant king's court? If it does, how do I confirm it and counter it? Will using Salazar Slytherin's rune help in protecting my mind from it? Continuing to think about the same things throughout class, Loki started to plan how he would protect himself from whatever was inside the coin. Eventually, getting bored of the repeated thinking, Loki pulled out the Marauder's map and began to scour it for Peter Pettigrew's name. Oh, he's there. He's back. Well, at least Sirius has some good news. Loki nodded and was about to put away the map, but out of the corner of his eyes, he noticed something peculiar on the 7th floor. There were 3 names on the corridor on the 7th floor. Mary Jackson, Frank and Lewis. Loki's blood chilled. So they were turned into sentinels. Loki calmly closed the map and let out a sigh after stuffing the map back into his pocket. "What happened, Loki?" Hermione asked, having heard him sigh. The 2 of them were looking at Professor Lupin, who was teaching them about the creature in the cage at the center of the classroom, a red cap. "I was thinking of a new story, and the problem is the story isn't going the right way," Loki whispered. "Why don't you try and tell it to me? Maybe I can help you out. Maybe that's what I will do. The main character in the story currently doesn't know how to fight the main villain. He's just too powerful. And he seems to be getting more powerful by the day." There was a soft pause, causing Loki to think even Hermione didn't have an answer for him, but after a few seconds, when Loki was about to give up and continue doing what he had planned, Hermione whispered, "That's a simple situation, isn't it? All the main character has to do in that case is to do all that he can. I'm sure other people around him in the story would do their best to pick up where he stopped. If the villain is much stronger than the hero, you just have to drag an even stronger character into the fray to protect the hero." Loki, while looking at the frantic red cap in the cage, felt some of the fog in his mind clear up. "Yes, I don't have to fight all of them on my own. I just have to give Adam and the professors enough hints so that they take up after me. I just have to give them a reason to step into the fray after giving them all the information I have. But how? How do I drag them into the fray? Trap a student. But they didn't do much when Ginny Weasley was captured in the 2nd year. Even when Hogwarts was closing because of it. Thanks. Loki mumbled to Hermione and she went back to paying attention to the lesson with a smile on her face. Eating dinner in the Great Hall, Loki glanced at the owls that were flying in with parcels and post and soon spotted Rowley. The small fluffy owl dived and landed on Loki's shoulders pecking a piece of tuna on the fork while Loki untied the parcel and letter attached to Rowley's leg. When Rowley flew away, Loki put down the parcel and began to read the letter written with handwriting that looked like a toddler had scratched on it. Master Loki, the package contains the item you asked me about. Oh. Loki's eyes widened and his eyebrows raised. Creature found the locket already. It's barely been a few hours since I wrote him the letter telling him about it. How? Loki felt a little dissatisfied with Creature since he hadn't written down anything else in the letter about the locket but chalked it up to his paranoid self since letters could be intercepted. But just as Loki was about to put away the letter, he spotted a small drop of water on one corner of the paper that lightened the yellowish color of the parchment. Scanning through the parchment more carefully after holding it up against the light, Loki grew slightly shocked. He cried writing this. There were several drops of water on the paper that Loki assumed were teardrops. Single quote. Single quote. Sitting in the Great Hall dumbfounded, Loki couldn't believe his own deduction. Creature crying. But, why? Loki was suspicious about the letter and then thought. There's a hidden message. I better check it out when I'm alone. But instead of spending more time thinking about Creature's out-of-character behavior, Loki first picked up the parcel and after saying a short goodbye to his tablemates walked away from the Great Hall to the Slytherin common room. He had to walk back with a group of students being escorted by the prefect because of Dumbledore's orders to keep the students safe. But as soon as he reached the dorm, Loki immediately created a wall of spirituality to isolate himself as he pushed a little bit of spirituality into the paper and watched as runes emerged into view. A hidden message. It took a few seconds, but Loki immediately figured out what Creature was trying to do. He was using the sound of the runes to spell out various words, a common method to encrypt information in the wizarding world. Scribbling on a new piece of parchment, Loki quickly figured out what Creature was explaining. Master Regulus was the one who stole this locket from the Dark Lord. It contains a piece of the foul man's soul in it. Please destroy him. Master Regulus gave his life for it and asked me to destroy it, but I have been unable to do so until today. Only the destruction of his soul will allow Master Regulus to rest in his grave. Loki was shocked. Single quote. You know whose soul is in this? What the heck, why? Suddenly Loki felt much more conscious around the package. He could also swear that he could feel an unhealthy aura around the package that would attack him if he did something strange to it. Stepping out onto the Quidditch pitch, Loki, under a disguise, moved towards the betting stations. How can I help you today, good sir? A student asked politely as Loki moved to the front of the line. I'd like to place a bet supporting Hufflepuff. Oh, and how much would you like to bet? 3 galleons under the name Gairman Sparrow, please, Loki said with a friendly smile. 3 galleons. The boy shouted, losing all his composure but managed to turn it into a whisper at the last second. Yes, you heard that right. I'd like to bet 3 galleons. Loki repeated with a smile. What do you think? Is it possible? The boy stared at Loki for a few seconds with an open mouth but then frantically picked up a quill and dipped it in ink while simultaneously speaking to Loki. Yes, please don't worry about it, you're in safe hands. Oh good, thank you. Dropping the money, Loki left the betting area and walked up to the stands after taking his receipt for the 3 galleons. The odds are about 6 to 1, meaning my 3 galleons should turn into 21 in the total payout. Damn, no one expects Hufflepuff to win this match, do they? I mean, I understand where they're coming from. Any match Harry has been a part of, Gryffindor has always won. Too bad they don't have a friend they can conveniently use to know the future. I want to see too, how Harry loses this game. Is it because of the rain? Did it obstruct his vision? But haven't they been practicing all month long for this event? Good thing I wore a coat with a warming charm on it to keep me out of the cold. Can't imagine how numb all the players are feeling. The match started with both teams flying onto the pitch, doing their best to keep steady under the heavy pitter-patter of the unending rain. Wearing goggles to keep the rain out of his eyes, Loki cast the impervious spell on it to keep his vision free from rain. With a clear vision of everything going on around him and his exaggerated vision that gave him a clear view of everything like he was a hawk, Loki spotted the golden snitch as it wove around the pitch. Should I try my hand at Quidditch? As Loki pondered meaninglessly on meaningless questions, he found his mind drifting away from the game. Or at least it remained adrift until the excited commentary entered his ears. And there goes Harry. Has he found it? The snitch. That was when Loki's eyes shifted towards Harry. He's flying high. Did he really spot the snitch? Loki's eyes followed Harry and spotted the snitch about 50 feet higher than him, except that wasn't all that they spotted. Between the clouds, Loki spotted thin dark robes fluttering as they moved in a rapid dash towards the stadium. The clouds cleared a little as they rushed ahead, allowing Loki to see something not even the teachers had seen yet. All of them. Loki stood aghast. A drop of rain slithered on his spine, causing him to break out of shock. His hand moved to his wand and he pulled it out faster than he ever had. In the fraction of a second that it took for Loki's hand to move to his wand and pull it out of the holder, his mind came up with several combinations and permutations to figure out the best possible approach for this situation. I can't use the Patronus charm. I can't reveal my own creation. Not that it would do much against an army. I can't inform someone about it before something happens. I'm stuck. Right then Loki remembered Hermione's wise words. You just have to drag an even stronger character into the fray. As if a spark had ignited in his eyes, Loki's brain worked faster than it ever had to produce an entirely new spell modified from the simple spark's charm. All I need to do is buy time. As long as I buy time, someone will be able to respond in time. To buy time, I don't need to defeat the Dementors but set them on a short pause. Vermilios Ruptis. Loki shouted at the top of his voice while standing up. Red sparks emerged out of Loki's wand and shot towards the sky at a speed that had to be faster than Harry's Nimbus 2001 since it caught up to him in no time. The sudden action caused most students in the stadium to become shocked while the rest were confused and even angry at Loki for interfering with the game. Especially the players themselves. Harry ducked under the spell as it wished past him and illuminated the dark clouds above. The red light expanded like a flare and under everyone's gaze exploded into a shower of bright white light. All the clouds that came in contact with the light exploded and vanished as if they were balloons that had been pricked by a needle. A large circular hole became available to everyone underneath, making the rain vanish for a few seconds. The golden sunlight that emerged through the clouds looked like a pillar that had been dropped down from the heavens. Except along with the heavenly pillar, all the teachers and the players on the field spotted the army of floating dark hooded creatures. Not even moments later, when Harry tried to break to stop himself from flying into what appeared like a death-filled sky, a burst of white light dragged everyone's attention. Dumbledore's wand was flicked and a large bright white ethereal heavenly bird flew up from the grounds. It moved faster than Loki's spell did and flew into the ocean of encroaching darkness without fear, and under everyone's stunned gaze dispelled it all. The Dementors rushed to try and at least get Harry, but the bird created an invisible shield around him. The Dementors tried for a few seconds until the ethereal bird snapped its beak and broke a Dementor's arm. The rest scattered almost immediately and rushed towards the castle. Loki was looking at Dumbledore and his only thought was simple: strong. That wasn't only Loki's thought. Everyone in the stadium suddenly understood just how powerful Dumbledore was. Impossibly strong. They didn't know how much stronger he was on a scale, but each one of them felt the vast chasm between him and them, especially since they could all feel the waves of happiness and positive emotions the Patronus exuded all throughout the stadium. Even as the rainfall slowly returned and started to fall onto Loki and all the other students, the Patronus radiated a sense of warmth and comfort. It did all of that while flying nearly 100 feet high in the sky. Loki was shocked, yes. But along with the shock, he'd also immediately grasped a key to solving one of his problems. The fog in his mind that Hermione had cleared a little became more transparent as a small but bright light emerged in it. I can use this. The key was surprisingly simple. How did I never think of this? I just need to involve Harry Potter in my plans somehow. Sitting in the office with McGonagall, Loki paid attention to her words as she explained calmly. The entire Ministry of Magic is closely tied to the Beyonder world. However, the Beyonders themselves do not have an official designation. In a tryst to keep the identities of Beyonders a secret, the Ministry simply deals with them as if they are consultants from the Unspeakables department. Loki frowned at this information. Why? Wouldn't it just be much easier to give them official positions? I mean, I'm sure no one would question orders from a higher up. I doubt the Aurors and the consultants work together well if they simply appear out of nowhere. McGonagall sighed audibly and then spoke after gathering her words. What you say is right, but it isn't so easy. To answer that question, we will first have to understand what pathways are controlled by the people in power in the Ministry. Loki leaned in, interested. The two pathways that are dominated by the Ministry of Magic are the Lawyer and the Arbiter pathways. Amelia Bones handles the Arbiter pathways. She is a demigod of the pathway and she has quite a few subordinates. Those of the Arbiter pathway are usually described as eager, outgoing and just people. They are some of the sweetest justice-oriented people you will find, even if they're a little hard-headed sometimes. Then, the trouble comes from the other pathway. The Lawyer pathway. Those on this pathway are the worst offenders of justice. Their entire pathway works on trying to bribe through the laws around them. In a few words, they would be described as corrupt and unfit for a just society. They thrive in gray areas and are intent on propagating them, unlike the Arbiters who thrive by turning all the grays white. Quote, then why don't we just support the Arbiter pathways Beyonders like Miss Amelia Bones to grow stronger and take over the Ministry? McGonagall smiled at Loki's naivety and explained clearly. Because you cannot get rid of the several Beyonders of the Lawyer pathway that are deeply intertwined with everything else. But that isn't the worst part. The worst part is that the Lawyer pathway Beyonders are supported by most of the purebloods and nobles around Britain. Loki frowned as he heard this but still asked something that was bugging him a little. But still, I'm sure with the headmaster's support Madame Bones can become the Ministry of Magic, can she not? McGonagall almost laughed but kept herself from doing so since she knew she was dealing with a child who did not understand much about politics and business of the real world. The trouble isn't the headmaster's support. It is the lack of support from the other Beyonders in the Ministry itself. Most people do not like living in a just world. If everything would happen according to the rules, there wouldn't be any room for personal interpretation. But, above all, it isn't like Arbiters can't be corrupted, can they? What's to say that the Arbiters won't act just like the Lawyer pathway Beyonders once they get into power? Loki's eyes widened slightly and he nodded in understanding. I think I get what you're saying. You mean to say that the Arbiters are currently only good, because that is all they can do, since all the gray and bad is dominated by those in the Lawyer pathway. Precisely. Now back to the topic I wanted to discuss with you. The work of Unspeakables and how Beyonders above the third year all participate in missions to gain real-life experience before officially joining them. Loki gulped a little and then looked at McGonagall. This is the closest thing to the Nighthawks in this world. The Unspeakables are responsible for managing various Beyonder artifacts traded worldwide through legal and illegal means. Each Beyonder artifact has its own uses and is hence recorded and strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic. Loki frowned when McGonagall said this, since he had a million objects in his hold that were never registered. In fact, all the items he made under Randolph were never registered. McGonagall looked at him and instantly picked up Loki's question, to which she responded with, of course, people don't like to explain what objects they carry and from where they obtained them, so nearly an estimated 70% of the world's Beyonder items are undocumented. Other estimates made by people who don't work for the Unspeakables put this estimate at 90%. That makes more sense. But I'm still surprised that no one told me about it during the apprenticeship. I guess the rules around this are really lax and not obeyed at all. As you can guess, the rules regarding this are very lax, since the Unspeakables are mostly dominated by the pureblood factions, which means that they wouldn't like to audit themselves. Loki nodded and McGonagall continued. The main work of the Unspeakables is to target and neutralize any sort of situation that can threaten the international secrecy pact of the magical world. As a rule of thumb, as long as things are done in secret they are usually glossed over unless the result would be disastrous, like causing the descent of a mad god or unleashing an evil entity. Loki looked at McGonagall's meaningful eyes and nodded with a little fear. So even human experiments and the like are not taken seriously unless they threaten the international secrecy pact. Surely she must be exaggerating, right? McGonagall could read Loki's furrowed brows like an open book as she spoke calmly. No, I'm not joking and I'm being serious. Although the White faction in Wizengamot does its best to curb any malpractices, there are several areas guarded by the Dark and the Grey faction that allow for rather disturbing things to happen. Very rarely are any White faction Baydoners allowed in such areas, since there are many secrets that need to be kept here. And I hope you'll remember this. Loki was stunned. Any questions? Loki thought about it for a while, before asking. Actually I have a question. It's not directly related to the topics we discussed today though. Don't worry Mr. Loki, I don't bite, so ask away. Loki smiled and spoke. Over the past few days I've been repeatedly hearing things I should not hear and seeing things that I should not see. I keep hearing someone crying and wailing as they offer themselves to the true creator. McGonagall's brows shot up, but Loki didn't relent. He continued to speak. Along with his name, I also hear the name of Gairman Sparrow very frequently. Although I don't know much about the boy, from my dreams, which might be my spirituality giving me hints, I always see him dressed as a Hogwarts student. I don't really understand all this, Professor. Can you help me make sense? It was McGonagall's turn to be surprised as her lips quivered. She stared at Loki for a second as he suddenly felt rather weird from having a demigod or saint use spirit vision on him. McGonagall stayed silent for a bit before speaking softly. It would be best you do not give in to any temptations, Mr. Loki. Especially not with the true creator. Huh? Why specially him? What's so special about him? McGonagall frowned as she closed her eyes because bad memories showed up, but she spoke nonetheless. Because one of the abilities of a Sequence 5 Shepherd of the Secret Supplicant pathway is that they can graze the souls of other Beyonders and use their abilities. Loki was confused for a second before his eyes widened and his jaw fell loose. You mean? Precisely. The Beyonders of the Mystery Prior pathway are a favorite for them because of our divination capabilities. I've lost many good students to them because they became involved in this, which led them down a rabbit hole because of their acting as a Mystery Prior. I hope you do not go down the same route, Mr. Loki. Loki gulped audibly before nodding. Good. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Loki was a little disappointed that he didn't learn more about the true creator from Professor McGonagall, which made his only viable option for protection from the Aurora Order, waking up Salazar Slytherin. He could have asked Professor McGonagall for more protection, for example by cooking up a slightly different story about the true creator trying to pursue him or tempt him. But Loki wasn't very keen on trying to get a baby monitor attached to him for his safety. He carried plenty of secrets already, and each one of them could have rather drastic implications if revealed. So Loki stared at the locket in front of him and then at the golden bowl, that he had started to call the begging bowl, hanging from Salazar's crystal. What happens if I just drop it into Salazar's begging bowl? Can't he fight out you-know-whose spirit and do whatever he has to with it? Loki had a frown on his face as he thought about these things and then looked at the topaz pendant that was by his side. Can't even divine about it since the locket can sense it. Loki's frown only turned deeper. How do I purify the locket then? Couldn't you have created a manual to handle situations such as this, you fool? Loki cursed and kicked Salazar's crystal. Sigh, lampooning will get me nowhere. With the weight on his shoulders, Loki sunk into the only chair in the room and stared at the precious locket that was kept inside a glass case. When Loki first saw the locket, it almost got him to touch it through faint whispers. Luckily, keeping the unicorn blood on himself kept the evil intentions of the soul that was inside the locket at bay. After that, Loki kept it inside a transfigured glass box that had walls of spirituality on all sides so its influence could no longer be felt outside. Along with it, Loki always placed both the cards of blasphemy he had with it so that no one could divine about it. Not that anyone was trying, since it had been left inside a cupboard in the Black family mansion for decades at this point and no one knew about it. Yet, Loki did it because prevention was better, lest an unholy Beander suddenly gain interest in the locket. Changing his gaze from the locket to the coin that was being given a similar treatment, Loki sighed again. It had been a month since the Quidditch match with the swarm of Dementors. Loki had gained a total of 21 galleons from the match in total. Yes, Cedric Diggory had still gotten the snitch in spite of the conditions during the play. It happened before anyone interfered in the match and Madame Hooch had seen it. Madame Hooch even signaled for the game to stop by blowing her whistle. But everyone was just too enamored by the Dementors and Dumbledore's Patronus and did not hear the whistle for the end of the game. The Gryffindors blamed Loki for interfering with the match, and his being a Slytherin didn't help the situation. But it did give him some more cred in his own house. For the first few days of the month, Loki tried to solve the puzzles which were the locket and the coin, but he had no idea how to inspect either of the items without either damaging them or getting infected by them. Quite a few times throughout the month Loki was brought to the point where he wanted to send Mr. Folly the locket so that he could dissect it and kill Voldemort's soul which was inside it. Loki had searched the Hogwarts library high and low for books related to soul magic but found none. In the end, he only stopped because he asked Creature to send him books regarding the soul from the Black Manor library and some of them did contain information about what the locket was. A Horcrux. I can destroy it with the help of the basilisk's venom. But, I can't damage the locket so I can't use it. As for using the creeping hunger again, well I have enough trouble sleeping with one part of Voldemort's soul in my ring. I don't want to have even more trouble bringing another piece into it and potentially making it stronger somehow. After staring at the locket for a bit longer, Loki sighed and stood up from his chair. Slap asterisk slap asterisk slap. Come on Loki. You can do this. Hyping himself up and getting his blood pumping, Loki finally acted on the last plan he had thought of. The plan involved him doing something he was best at. Stealing. Except one part of it was stupidly insane. Closing his eyes to calm himself, Loki took deep breaths for a while and started the sacrificial ritual to send the locket above the grey fog, into the Saphira castle. This wasn't the stupidest part of the plan. And this step wasn't without reason. If it took Eamon so much jumping through hoops to wrestle away the control of the Saphira castle from Klein, and Klein was able to bring the Beander characteristics corrupted by the true creator into the Saphira castle, I don't think you know who will be able to usurp the Sephiroth from me. There was another important reason for choosing the Saphira castle as his battleground. It can heal me if I suffer any egregious wounds. With the altar set up, Loki started to light the candles on it from left to right, signifying the god he was worshipping, himself, as Mr. Error, then himself and then this ritual. Loki was doing everything very carefully because he didn't want Voldemort's soul to use whatever mistake he might make to wrestle away the control of the castle from him. Once the ritual was performed, Loki stepped into the Saphira castle and looked at the crimson star that was pulsating brightly in the jaded background of the grey fog standing out from the other crimson stars. With patience and a calm movement, Loki spread his spirituality over the pulsating crimson star and expanded a gateway for his spirit body to enter the ritual area. Without any further delay, Loki stepped into the gateway and picked up the locket encased inside the glass box, inside a wall of spirituality. Few nothing's gone wrong so far, Loki said, examining the locket inside the box that was sitting patiently, completely oblivious to its surroundings. With a deep breath, Loki moved towards the locket and dispelled his wall of spirituality around it. He waited for a moment to see if the locket would react in any way, but nothing happened. Good. Then setting aside the glass case, Loki pulled out the error card of blasphemy that was in it. He assimilated the card into his astral body and stood as a regal Beander. His clothes had transformed into regal deep blue robes, a giant witch's hat, a plague doctor's mask, tight black gloves, a cane and a monocle. Even still Loki was deathly afraid of the soul that was inside the locket. So he carefully used a pair of tongs to slowly pull out the locket from its glass case, set it on the table in front of him and observed it for a few seconds as if making up his mind to do something. Now for the dangerous part. With a serious look on his face, Loki performed the one task the LOTM novel ceaselessly reminded must never be done. If Klein can look at the sun god directly for a little bit of time, then I can look at a demigod. Loki activated his spirit vision. A ghostly gray ball of smoke came into view. It appeared to be inhabiting the locket. It took Loki a great deal of focus not to act on the fear he instinctually felt as his gaze locked in on the piece of soul trapped inside the locket. In the same moment when Loki's gaze locked onto the resident soul, it grew eyes, realistic eyes that were frantically spinning around above a mouth that started whispering forbidden knowledge. Loki felt someone stab his brain repeatedly and blood dripped from his nose in excess like a torrential river of red. But he boldly dove through it all since there was a reason Loki was going into the fight bare without even using Salazar Slytherin's concealment rune. His only preparation was accommodating the card of blasphemy. Because Loki had accommodated the error card of blasphemy, his sequence was forcefully raised from a meager sequence 7 cryptologist to a sequence 6 Prometheus. This allowed him to see everything in his spirit vision as runes which could be stolen. There were several different runes, ones to describe locomotion, others to describe the languages one knew. There were even runes that corresponded to various unknown abilities, and last but not least there were runes that corresponded to his target, the soul itself. Loki started to quickly use his spirituality to shift through all the runes he was seeing. Fool! Loki heard the soul speak directly into his mind. Voldemort had established a connection with Loki as soon as he had locked his sights on his soul and could now use it to exercise his abilities and target his attacks on his astral and mental bodies. The soul glowed and morphed as it appeared out of the locket and manifested with the help of a dark fog. A large face composed of only a pair of bloodshot eyes and lips that appeared as thin as sticks manifested in front of Loki. A smirk played on the lips of the gigantic face in front of Loki as they slowly parted to speak in Latin, death. Loki instantly spat out blood from his mouth, yet his gaze remained firmly planted on what was in front of him. Almost there. Loki was just a few small pinpricks away from shifting through and comprehending all the runes that were floating around the locket to recognize which rune belonged to the soul. Loki's knowledge of runes and what the symbols meant came into quick use as his mind decomposed the various figures of strokes he was seeing in the air to their corresponding runic symbols. The complicated structures were broken down bit by bit. He was working through the pain and using his superior mind to analyze everything visible as he ruled them out one by one. These are not what I am looking for. I am looking for the runes that the idiot in front of me engraved on his soul to anchor it to lock it. Loki's brain felt like it was growing hot under the mental assault that Voldemort was performing, but also under his own overuse. It felt like his mind was a stone's throw away from crumbling under its own weight. Sequence 3 Blather huh. A strong sense of suppression overtook Loki's mind as he gazed at the figure of a saint of the abyss pathway, but he did not give in. He had one goal from the beginning and he focused on achieving it. And he did. Decomposing the runes engraved directly onto Voldemort's soul, Loki near instantly grasped it with his sight and never let it escape no matter how the fog around it swirled or boiled. Pouring his spirituality into the necklace of giants on his neck, Loki felt a burst of strength encompass him as a twilight glow radiated from him. Loki forcibly raised his hand to perform the theft. But as soon as Loki's hand postured for the theft, the assault he felt on his mind and astral body doubled. Yet, keeping his focus, he began to act by utilizing every last drop of the energy in his body. How funny. An ant thinks he can take on a saint. Voldemort snarled. The dreadful one-sided deadlock that had existed between Loki and Voldemort had started to take a toll on Loki. Added to that the sweet words filled with corruption Voldemort was using, Loki felt overwhelmed. His astral body started to mutate, his skin wriggled, his muscles spasmed, his vision turned red from the blood that leaked out of his eyes and his organs felt like they were ruptured and bleeding internally. Above all, his mind felt like a million knives were stabbed into it, only increasing by the moment. Getting worse and worse as Loki started to go in and out of consciousness. Looking at his condition, Voldemort smirked. Victory was closer for him than it was for Loki. You are pathetically weak. Give up and I will let you serve me as a slave. Maybe I won't destroy the lives of your loved ones. Voldemort spoke in a voice that resembled the grating of glass against one's eardrums. Except in the spur of a moment, the second Beyander ability in the Necklace of Giants exploded outward. A twilight halo emerged with Loki as the center, spreading around into a 10-meter radius, causing the entirety of Voldemort's soul to freeze as it became trapped within the purification ring. An unholy scream emerged from Voldemort's soul as it started to burn under the constant assault of the purification ring filled with twilight light. Since there was no body, the purification circle directly assaulted Voldemort's bare soul. But that wasn't all that Loki did. He immediately focused on the concealment rune in his mind, turning his body of heart and mind completely invisible. The action broke the connection that Voldemort had with Loki until now. This was why Loki had gone in blind. So that any connection Voldemort would build up could be momentarily distorted. Loki didn't trust that the concealment rune would protect his mind from Voldemort the entire time with him being right in front of him. And so he chose to bet it all on one fully planned coordinated moment that needed it the most. It paused Voldemort's dreadful attack, leaving him stunned and confused. Loki took full advantage of this pause and increased the pressure on the rune that was anchoring his soul and managed to knock it out of the locket by flicking his wrist, causing it to fly towards him. Strike! A smile finally formed on Loki's battered and tired face, but he didn't stop yet. No, not yet. Although Voldemort had been knocked out of the locket, it still did not mean Loki had won yet. He could still attack Loki, or worse, realize exactly where they were. And that is exactly what happened. Voldemort's focus shifted from Loki, something Loki had done his best to prevent from happening from the beginning by using himself as juicy bait that was completely unprotected from Voldemort's assault. The gray fog that was lying completely still until just now began to churn. No. You. WHO or you. Voldemort screamed as he dove towards Loki, trying to stop him from controlling the gray fog by possessing him or using his Beyander abilities to slow Loki down, but it was too late. A hurricane created by the fog emerged inside the purification ring of twilight. The towering hurricane made out of the gray fog forcibly sucked Voldemort's soul into it, not giving him even a single chance to retaliate as it was immediately torn to shreds. And just like that, the saint that had arrogantly proclaimed Loki's death just a few seconds prior had vanished, eliminated. Loki stayed still for a few moments, doing his best to use the gray fog all around himself to make sure that the Dark Lord wasn't coming back from oblivion and to heal his wounds. Is that it? Can I give the locket to Salazar now? No, not yet. I need to do something before that. Loki summoned his topaz pendulum. The piece of soul that attacked me has been vanquished. The piece of soul that attacked me has been vanquished. The piece of soul that attacked me has been vanquished. The piece of soul that attacked me has been vanquished. But Loki didn't open his eyes to check on the pendulum that was spinning clockwise. They remained close as his breathing slowly changed from heavy to light, from frantic deep inhales to pump his ruined body with oxygen to calm slow breaths as his body relaxed and he fell asleep because of the calm and relaxation of cogitation. Waking up groggily, Loki felt like he'd been hit by a truck. He looked around while slowly opening his eyes. Oh, I'm back here. Did I run out of spirituality and get kicked out of the castle? Pushing himself off the ground while groaning and adjusting due to the pain he was feeling from both the terrible battle he had with Voldemort's soul and his odd sleeping posture on the hard floor, Loki looked at the altar that he'd set up for the ritual. The candles on it had melted away and the fire had long gone out, but there was nothing else on it. Did I leave the locket in the castle? Loki stood up and relit the candles and quickly performed a bestowment ritual to bless himself with the locket which was just lying on the table inside the castle. Beside the locket was however something that Loki had completely forgotten about. Beyander characteristics. Which sequence is it? Sequence 3 Blatherer. The characteristics looked strange. They looked like a set of small teeth bones, shaped almost like a jaw, but every tooth was aligned in a different jagged way, making it quite hard to believe that it could be an actual jaw. Simultaneously a dark mist swirled around it like a pack of flies around rotting food. Loki grabbed the jaw and stuffed it inside the glass case the locket was inside earlier and sealed it under a wall of spirituality. With the locket now in hand, Loki looked at it carefully for a while, seeing if there were any remnants of Voldemort's soul still attached to it. He remembered having already done this before he fell asleep, but he didn't want to take any more risks. Once he was sure, he left the Saphira castle and his eyes dragged themselves until he was looking right at Salazar through the crystal. Sigh, I hope he wakes up when I drop this into it. Loki, however, didn't go to Salazar's crystal. He left the locket on one of the shelves filled with books. There were several precautions he had to take before he would give Salazar his locket. And so Loki pulled out the Marauder's map to check if there were any people outside the room, patrolling it. Ever since Loki had noticed the 3 people patrolling around the 7th floor, he'd become borderline paranoid about monitoring their presence. He'd always keep his eyes on the map to see if they were anywhere near him. The only times he'd come into the puzzle room would be when there was no one there, and even then he'd hide himself using his illusions with the Marauder's map out so that he wouldn't run into them. Luckily there was currently no one outside the room. Probably because they have to attend classes. Loki reasoned, since he had fallen asleep and woken up after a proper nap. Loki pulled out his topaz pendant and performed a divination. Now is the best time to sacrifice the locket to Salazar Slytherin. Now is the best time to sacrifice the locket to Salazar Slytherin. Now is the best time to sacrifice the locket to Salazar Slytherin. Comma. Now is the best time to sacrifice the locket to Salazar Slytherin. Opening his eyes, Loki looked at the result and was surprised because the pendant was spinning anti-clockwise. Ah, is it because he is of the darkness pathway? Meaning his domain is the night. I understand. Satisfied with his reasoning, Loki calmed down and walked out of the room, leaving everything inside as it was. He had classes to attend and he was already running late. Loki rushed to his room under the cover of illusions and took a quick cold shower, which had the added effect of freshening up his mood and getting his blood pumping. A smirk eventually made its way onto his face. I beat a saint. Hey. Arriving at potions class, Loki entered the classroom and ducked behind students to arrive at his place in the room beside Hermione. Loki, I thought something happened to you. Hermione exclaimed in a whisper. Haha, as if anything could take me down. These bones have been through a decade and will live through a million more, Loki said with pride, a little loudly since he was still feeling excited that he'd beaten a saint, all on his own. Seeing Loki was all right, Hermione rolled her eyes at his antics, but someone else wasn't pleased with his boasting. Bang! This is a classroom, Mr. Loki. Not a place for you to live through your delusions. Snape slapped the back of Loki's head with his textbook. The class snickered at Loki, everyone doing their best to not break out in full-blown laughter while Loki just ducked his head and began to focus on the potion Hermione was making, helping her by slicing the ingredients and such. Class ended gracefully and Loki passed through the rest of the classes with equal excitement until it was finally the end of the day and Loki could entertain the idea of going back into the puzzle room. Except, there was just one problem. Damn, why aren't they moving away from the spot? Did they know that something is going to happen today? It had been a couple of hours into the night and the 3 students were still patrolling around the puzzle room's entrance. HMPF. They don't know that I've defeated a saint. As if 3 mere brats will be able to stop me. With a determined resolve, Loki walked around the castle collecting chalk from different classrooms while consulting the Marauder's map to check where everyone was so that he wouldn't get caught. Once he was done with his preparations, Loki ran up to the 6th floor where Finch was and while masking his face with illusions. Hey, You're a squib, aren't you? Loki shouted while modifying his voice to be high-pitched. WWHO or you? Finch shouted and began to follow Loki up the stairs where he tried to chase him through to the 7th floor. Rushing through the corridors at a steady pace, Loki smirked. All right, now to reveal the hiding spots of these 3 fools. The students were under a disillusionment charm, something that kept them invisible, but Loki knew their locations through the map he was holding. Finch moved behind Loki, following him through, but he didn't expect Loki to suddenly throw chalk powder into the air, making it form a white cloud. Finch stopped, thinking it was something that might harm him since students had done this sort of thing before, but soon he noticed 3 distinct outlines form from the chalk powder Loki had tossed into the air. The invisible students and Finch froze for a few seconds before Finch and Miss Norris jumped at 2 of them, holding onto them tightly while the 3rd one escaped by breaking into a run. Loki watched all of this action while hidden in the shadows until he scanned the Marauder map and saw all those involved either rush back to the dorms or be taken to Finch's office. Too easy. Of course it is, I've beaten a saint after all. HMPF. Distant away in faraway lands, a ghost-like soul shivered as it felt a part of itself suddenly vanish from the world. Voldemort searched around in confusion for a while, trying to understand the source of this feeling, but only settled after possessing an unsuspecting traveler to perform a simple ritual. Who did it? How did my failsafe fail to inform me how it happened? Was it him? No, not even he could do such a thing. It is a part of me after all, we share a bond deeper than anyone else. And no one could have just killed me. That was the strongest one of them all. It was a saint after all. I need her help. Voldemort used the unsuspecting traveler's body to perform a new ritual. The response to it was a single piece of paper that floated out of the candle fire after it flared for a second. Voldemort caught the piece of paper and looked at it with a frown. A Sephiroth. Like the one she wants me to conquer for her. I need to speed up the plans for my rebirth. Stepping into the puzzle room, Loki looked around and found everything arranged just as he'd left it. Clearing away the altar and making himself presentable, Loki walked up to Salazar's begging bowl with the locket in his hand. Damn, the locket's heavy. The locket had a see-through amber glass cover beneath which was a series of emerald stones set in the shape of an S, forming a snake, likely to represent Salazar himself. There was something written around the snaking figure in the center, but Loki found it hard to read. It was as if it was written in an entirely different language. Loki guessed it was Parseltongue and that only Salazar could read it. But why would snakes need a written language? Is there a secret society of snakes in this world or something? Lizard people. Glancing one last time at the locket and its several intricacies, Loki let it slip from his hands and fall into the bowl. The moments when the locket slid through Loki's fingers stretched in time as Loki's brain performed one last check, thinking about all the facts related to the matter and wondering if this was the right thing to do. I guess I've done everything I could. Now all that remains is to see the fruit of my labor. Clink. The locket finally landed in the begging bowl and its chain slithered on top of it, collecting like a coiling snake, forming a small pile. Loki looked with bated breath as the crystal began to hum once again as soon as the locket fell into the bowl. An ethereal wispy mist parted from it and crawled into the bowl, weaving through the air like a dog smelling its meal. Suddenly the mist flinched, recoiling in what Loki thought was rejection, but he couldn't have been more wrong. As soon as Loki was about to write this try off as a failure and before he felt the frustration inside him explode, the mist grew thicker and denser. It shot towards the locket and immediately crept into it. Loki saw a storm form within the locket's confines, while simultaneously, the entire room dimmed in brightness as if the spirituality being used to power the room was being directed elsewhere. Clink asterisk clink asterisk clink. Loki heard several cracks form in a glass, but he couldn't find any cracks on the locket. The amber cover was perfectly alright from what he could see, except that was when his eyes landed on the crystal that contained Salazar Slytherin. Cracks like spiderwebs had formed in multiple places on the crystal in which Salazar Slytherin lay. Loki stepped back and shielded his face with his hands to protect himself from any stray glass pieces, but a sudden wave of spirituality emerged from the locket and burst forth throughout the room, knocking him off his feet. Now on the floor, Loki dragged himself backwards and put some distance between himself and the crystal, as the storm that had originally remained in the locket's confines was now bursting forth around the crystal, growing by the second. Loki watched the storm grow to cover up the entire crystal in which Salazar Slytherin lay. All Loki could hear now was the roar of the storm brewing inside the slowly darkening room. It felt like the wind was roaring inside his ears. This is loud. I'm quite sure everyone in the castle is up and awake right now. Loki wanted to get up and rush towards the exit, but that was when it happened. From within the storm that had taken over the room, Loki felt a powerful force of suppression. It pushed him into the ground with pressure enough to make his bones groan under the weight. Loki worked harder than ever to keep his eyes open to see what was going on while scraping the marble on the floor to drag himself away from the impromptu hurricane in the center of the room. It was hard, but after what felt like a million years, Loki reached a bookshelf and proceeded to take shelter behind it. But he need not have, since as soon as Loki's back touched the bookshelf, a sudden bang caught his attention. Leaning over to look at the crystal, Loki felt a sudden rush of wind blow past his face that forced his cheeks open and close his eyes. When he opened them, everything in the room had returned to be perfectly normal. Except the crystal containing Salazar Slytherin had vanished and looked like it never existed. What? Loki stood up, albeit with some difficulty, and walked over to the center of the room where only 3 blue crystals remained. All the other crystals were still the same, with one of the crystals containing a woman while the other 2 remained empty. But there was a short change where the 4th crystal with Salazar Slytherin used to be. In its place, hovering without any support, now was the golden begging bowl that Loki had placed the locket into. But instead of the locket, it now contained something else. Puzzled about what the strange card-like object was, Loki bent over to get a closer look. The card was drifting in and out of view by becoming translucent and turning pitch black, as if it existed but at the same time didn't. Loki felt a sense of suppression from the item. It made him realize that it was a Beander item of the error pathway or one of its neighboring sequences. Yet he did not pick it up carelessly. Loki stared at the card some more and felt a little confused by the familiar symbol on it. Where have I seen this before? The symbol was the drawing of a curling shell with 4 clocks with different times on the 4 cardinal directions around the shell. Time. Loki's brain clicked and he instantly performed the celestial worthy of heaven and earth ritual behind a few bookshelves to go back into the Saphira castle, where he summoned the chair he used to sit on. He immediately looked at the symbol behind his chair and it was exactly as he'd remembered it to be. A snail's shell with clocks on the cardinal directions showing different times in them. Loki became shocked. He exited the Saphira castle and moved back to the begging bowl. Is this my reward? An item from the error Beander pathway. But what does this mean? How did Salazar Slytherin have a Beander item of the error pathway? Is it the same way he learnt to call me Mr. Error? But instead of joy for the first time since coming to this world, Loki felt a genuine sense of anger boiling in his chest. What does the idiot think? That I can fend off the true creator and whoever else is working with him with a charm? Seriously. The hell is wrong with this man? Fool used me to wake him up. And then I am given nothing but a charm in exchange. What does he think I am? His personal assistant who wakes him up like an alarm clock. I was naive. Too naive. Thinking that these idiots would have helped me in some way. HMPF. Just let them wait until I become a true god, then I'll make sure they pay for everything. Rude bastards didn't even thank me for waking him up. Rebirth epic. I'll make sure it is changed to the vengeance epic if they don't compensate me appropriately. But what am I supposed to do with the true creator and his sidekick now? Loki was frowning. He didn't like what was happening one bit. After performing a multitude of divinations, Loki decided he would pick up the item and send it above the gray fog, since that was the safest place for it. I also need to figure out what that charm does. Was it made by a previous angel or god of the error pathway? But how is it possible? Aren't there no other Beyonders of the Error pathway? I mean Walburga didn't even know about any of the Lord of the Mysteries pathways. What exactly is going on? Does it have something to do with Salazar Slytherin? Looking back at the charm in the begging bowl, Loki carefully picked it up. As soon as Loki picked up the charm, the begging bowl melted away into a liquid. The golden liquid streaked across the marble floor until it reached the other crystals, from where it climbed those crystals and merged with their begging bowls. The room trembled a little and the crystals, as if having a mind of their own, buzzed as they realigned on the floor, crawling as they rearranged themselves into a triangular formation. If before they looked like a pinwheel with 4 blades, they now looked like a pinwheel with 3 blades. Loki stood confused, but he soon ignored it and pulled out the Marauder's map. Why's there no one outside? Well, except for the one student that escaped from Finch, he seems to have returned, but it's just him. No other students, no professors, and not even the headmaster. Everyone was still sleeping soundly inside their beds in their dormitories. Is the map broken? The sound produced by the entire fiasco after Loki dropped the locket into Salazar's begging bowl was loud enough to make Loki feel like he would lose his sense of hearing. Yet it looked like the sound hadn't been carried out of the room. I guess the room's just that good at keeping things that happen in it within its bounds. Loki looked at the student who was loitering outside the doors and shrugged. I guess I'll just stay here for now and leave tomorrow morning when he has to go for classes. But I wanted to take a shower. Suddenly, Loki felt the room around him shift. The bookshelves slid across the room, and in one of the corners, a fancy bathroom with a large tub in its center was built. Putting his hands together behind his back, Loki began to examine everything about the new addition to the room. There's body wash and shampoo too. From where did it get all of this? Eventually, Loki just sat down in the tub after filling it with water and just let himself soak in the water for a while. He was tired, and submerging his whole body into the water gave him a sense of relaxation he hadn't gotten in a long time. Time passed, and once Loki was satisfied, he cleaned himself up using a body wash and slipped out of the tub after wearing new clothes that seemed to have been conjured just to fit him. Why am I being treated like royalty now? Loki wondered, but paid no attention and assumed it was his reward for helping Salazar. He was currently very mad about helping Salazar, but he kept quiet for now so that he could first examine everything that had changed. Once he was tidy, Loki finally embarked on a quest around the room to check the one other thing he was interested in. The books on the shelves. Have any of them been unlocked for me to read through? Pulling on a book with a red cover titled, Stories of Valor, Courage and Sacrifice. Loki found that it wouldn't budge, like it was glued to the shelf it was on. Really? Still no. Maybe the green books are free since I helped Slytherin. Loki walked up to a different book titled, Horrors of the Dark, and tugged on it lightly, and to his happiness and surprise the book slid off the shelf like it was on butter and moved into his hand. Good. With giddiness in his heart and a wide smile on his face, Loki cracked the book's spine and began to read through it. Except, the abyss is but the seabed of darkness. Get lost in the darkness, and the abyss will make you a demon. There was a warning on the front page that creeped Loki out. Turning the page, Loki began to read through the section titled, Note from the Author. This book deals with my experiments to make a wand. Based on Rowena's experiment in creating magic, I suspect that Beyonders will slowly shift towards using wands in favor of easily being able to manipulate their spirituality. I'm probably just tired, so I read that wrong. Let's think about what Salazar wrote after that. So Salazar Slytherin was the one to delve into the art of wand making. Surprising, I'd have expected Rowena to be the one to do it. So Ollivanders learnt the art of wand making from him. A little confused, Loki continued to read ahead since he had nothing else to practically do. There is still a little bit of time, about 100 years before Rowena makes magic available to everyone, and so I want to perfect the art of wand making before then, so that Beyonders and other spiritually sensitive people, that I've come to term wizards and witches, will be able to take part in this grand experiment of ours. What? Helga has already started experimenting with Rowena's magic for cooking, while Godric has begun experimenting with it to make things explode, so this study will be my contribution. At least it is something more useful than what the two other bumbling idiots are doing. What, though, I must confess, using a wand will probably give me the edge to beat Godric and finally take control of the Sphere. Never mind, I'm sure Mr. Error has something better planned for me. What the? I think Mr. Error would be proud of me for doing this. Quote. Loki almost stumbled when his legs went limp. He could no longer ignore what was staring him right in the face as Salazar Slytherin was trying to do his very best to slap him with the fact. Rowena made magic. Not like a spell or a charm. The real magic that everyone uses today. Loki stared at the book expecting it to speak something or say something about the maddening information it just revealed, but like any good book it remained inanimate. Single quote. Single quote. Loki felt his mind spin as he turned to look towards the crystal that still remained. He expected any of them to validate the information in the book or even burst out laughing and tell Loki that all of it was a joke. But nothing of the sort happened. With a soft sigh, Loki covered his face and placed the book back on the shelf. He thought about a faucet, and a luxurious sink appeared in one corner of the room. Walking to the sink, Loki did his best not to think about what he'd just read. He washed his face, but even the cold water droplets running down his face couldn't break him out of his shock. Loki then requested the room for a bed, and once it appeared in front of him, he sunk into it. Single quote. I need a break. Maybe everything Salazar does won't end up disappointing me further after all. He's a crazy old man. But I'm still angry at him. Did he take offense to me kicking his crystal earlier when I was mad at him, and that's why he didn't give me a better reward or help? Whatever, still rude. Waking up the next morning with a slight headache, Loki tumbled down from his bed and reached for his clothes that were hung on a hanger after his bath last night. Patting the pocket in his robes, Loki pulled out a vial that should have been filled with the ethereal silverish unicorn blood. Damn! Loki whispered as he looked at the vial. It had turned so red that it looked black. Loki thought it made sense since the ethereal spirit that escaped from the crystal was out of it for a longer period before it vanished. Could I have used walls of spirituality to reduce the interference from outside? No, I doubt my spirituality would have been enough to suppress whatever was happening inside the room last night. I probably would have just suffered a severe headache and fainted. I hope everyone else in the school's alright though. Changing into his robes, Loki checked the Marauder's map and found no one outside the room, much to his relief. Sipping on the tea that contained the same properties as the rejuvenation potion to heal himself, Loki cast one last glance at the room as the events of last night played through his head. This room seems to be more special than just a room built for the puzzles set by the founder. Maybe I can call it the Room of Wishes. No, it can't fulfill my wishes, or can it? I wish for immortality. As soon as Loki made the wish, the lights in the room dimmed imperceptibly. Loki stared at the room for a few seconds expecting something miraculous to happen, but nothing did. The lights came back to normal and Loki became dumbfounded. Did the room just get disappointed with me? Well, if it could really perform miracles, it would have been unexpected. I guess I can call it the Room of Convenience then, since it makes living in it convenient. Alright, from today I'll call you the Room of Convenience. With a nod to himself as he was satisfied by the name, Loki was about to push the door open and leave, but he stopped. Can you make me an exit that will let me leave from here unseen? Perhaps near the exit to the greenhouses. In one of the broom closets. The room buzzed for a few seconds and a small, less grand door formed in front of Loki. Oh, you can. You really are convenient. Loki nodded and made his way out the door. Stepping out, the door soundlessly closed behind Loki's back and vanished after it blended back to become a part of the wall which was part of the broom closet. Loki looked at the Marauder's map to reorient himself, and once he was sure he was near one of the exits of the castle, Loki slipped out of it. Entering the greenhouse, Loki found an empty spot beside Daphne where the Slytherins were standing and slipped to be beside her. Classes progressed as normal, but throughout the day, each time he was asked to use magic, From the slightly complex cheering charm in the charms class to the simple fire charm to threaten dangerous plants in herbology, Loki's brain pounded. Rowena made magic. Loki's head was stuck on the simple sentence that shook the framework he had created about the world. And didn't Salazar say, "Mr. Error would be proud of me"? Who is this other Mr. Error? Is there already a true God in the error pathway? But if there is, then how come no one knows about him? Wouldn't there be some record of him somewhere? Unless he wants to keep himself hidden. But why? What reason would a God have to hide? And above all, didn't I conclude before that the Lord of the Mysteries pathways were taken by her, who rules the abyss? So how's there another Mr. Error? Is the other Mr. Error hiding because of that? But, it's not like the rest of the world even knows about the founders and how specifically Rowena Ravenclaw was the one that invented magic. Maybe there's someone out there that knows. But, I doubt there's someone like that if even the oldest and most ancient House of Black didn't know about it. Or maybe Walburga didn't know because she was just a demigod and not even a saint. Perhaps you know who and Adam know something about it. Who are the other high sequence beyonders in this world? Perhaps they too know about it. Loki's mental inspection ended with that question because a student stopped him on his way to the dormitory after dinner. Yes, Loki asked as he looked at the senior. Professor Snape has called for you. Professor Snape. Yes, he's waiting for you in the potions classroom. I see. Thank you for letting me know. Loki nodded with a smile and changed his direction from the dormitory to the potions classroom in the dungeons. Knock knock. Come in, said a soft voice from inside. Loki entered the classroom and closed the door behind him. His eyes naturally found Snape, who was right behind his desk, brewing a potion. Loki calmly made his way towards the professor, wondering what he'd needed him for, but Snape's words made him stop. Why weren't you at the hospital wing today? Loki sighed and pulled out a vial from his pocket. Carry this thing around all the time since the first day the attack happened, Loki said, tossing the dirty vial towards Snape. Snape flicked his wand and the vial stopped midair, floating just above the cauldron it would have fallen into otherwise. Snape looked at it and frowned as his brows furrowed. Unicorn blood? He asked, unsure about his guess. Yep, got it off of the unicorn that I saved in my first year. Loki explained. Snape said nothing after that, as if expecting something more, so Loki elaborated. I have an item that belongs to the fighter pathway. I mean the warrior pathway. It helps me purify the vial each time it's corrupted by whatever's causing the calamity. There was a short silence after that, which Snape broke by speaking after flicking his wand, causing the vial to shoot back to Loki. Help me make rejuven. Sure. Loki nodded and interrupted even before Snape could finish his sentence. Loki rolled up his sleeves to bring himself the required materials. He felt this was just the kind of thing he needed right now. Something monotonous and repetitive to take his mind off things and distract himself. As Loki started to make the potion, he asked Snape a random question. Does the headmaster know what's causing all this? Snape said nothing for a while, but in a few seconds he whispered, yes. Then why hasn't he taken care of it already? There was a soft silence for a while, interrupted only by the simmering of the potion in the cauldrons and the popping of bubbles, but Snape then spoke, I do not know. Perhaps, because it is not time yet. Not time yet. For what? For someone to actually die? Loki asked lightly while cracking a joke. One does not simply question a god's intentions, Snape whispered, as if he were talking about forbidden knowledge. After calmly evaluating Loki's potion and feeling satisfied with it, he explained, seeking knowledge you should not possess can drive you to insanity. Loki just rolled his eyes and went back to making the potion. His mind partially wondered about the meaning behind the words Snape said, but he soon lost himself in the monotony of the task presented before him. Exiting the potions classroom late into the night, Loki hid under illusions and slipped back toward the 7th floor. Checking the Marauders map, Loki couldn't see any students lingering there like last night. Did they give up because of yesterday? Probably. Loki nodded to himself and continued walking toward the 7th floor, yet he still donned an illusion to keep himself from being recognized by the paintings. Walking up to the wall he recognized morphed into the doors. Loki began to walk around the corridor while focusing on the riddle Salazar had given him, but then even before he finished his first round he stopped. The air is distorted, Loki thought as he saw the air behind him shift like something hot was making it wave. The hair on the back of his neck rose as he looked around himself with his enhanced night vision. He couldn't see anyone or anything out of place in the corridor, yet his instincts were blaring at him like sirens on a seagull. Ducking for what appeared to be no reason at all, Loki collapsed to the floor and rolled away from where he was just standing. And it was good that he did, because as soon as he stood up and looked back, he found, to his horror, a girl standing with a particularly foul-looking bone knife in her hand. Loki's brain fired at the new information and he came to a single conclusion. They tricked the Marauder's map somehow. Rolling away from the place he was standing on instinct, he felt heavy vibrations pass through the floor. Loki found the stone on the spot he was just squatting smashed into pieces. A little distance away was a boy holding his wand pointed in his direction. Wand. I need to use my wand. Loki reminded himself and forcefully ripped his wand from his sides while dodging the spells the boy cast on him. Jumping away to dodge the latest spell, Loki pointed his wand at the girl who was getting super close to him while holding the mean-looking knife. For some reason, I feel like getting stabbed by that knife wouldn't be good news. Loki ducked under the girl's swipe and pointed his wand at her face. Velox Akis, Loki exclaimed, sending a spiraling needle of wind and lightning right at her head. The girl, in what could only be described as a feat of gymnastics and inhumane flexibility, bent backwards while balancing herself by extending her leg into the air, dodging the spell Loki had unleashed at such a close distance. Imperio. Loki jumped back, away from the girl, and narrowly dodged the spell from the boy behind her. Damn, they want to capture me alive for some reason. Is it to open the damn room? Loki dodged another blow from the boy holding the wand before he ducked low and jumped backwards to keep both the boy and the girl in his view. To trick the Marauder's map, they would have to trick the castle. I don't think it is quite possible to trick the castle, at least not as easily as being able to do it without coming in contact with the castle wards. But then, how? Loki was forced to halt his thoughts, which were nadering, and dodge another swipe from the girl holding the mean bone knife. Possibly a Bjodner item from the darkness pathway. No, I doubt they could have gotten their hands on such a thing. Then someone higher up in the castle is helping them. Adam. But why wouldn't he just directly stalk or attack me if he wanted me? No, there's some other method. But Loki wasn't given enough time to think about it. The boy suddenly let out a guttural growl as he landed on his forearms and started running at Loki like an animal. I've won against a saint, you fools. You think you can take me down with just this much? Loki cursed in his mind as he jumped over the boy running at him like a rabid lunatic dog. Then with a swipe of his wand, Loki shouted, Voridis Ruptis, sending a fast-moving torrent of green sparks towards the girl who was also running at him. The girl tried to dodge the sparks, but Loki smirked. That's what I wanted you to do, you fool. Bang! Creating a loud sound, Loki exploded the torrent of green sparks that flew toward the girl, creating a large explosion right above her face. Much to Loki's horror, however, at the last moment, right when the explosion was set off, the girl threw the knife in her hand right at Loki. The explosion boosted the knife, increasing its speed to turn it near invisible, as it shot through the air, flying at Loki's torso. With a quick step to the side, Loki barely dodged the knife as it made a small scratch on his face. Loki felt fine for a second, but then almost collapsed to the floor. His entire face felt like it was on fire. The single scratch drew a thin line of blood all across his cheek, but he couldn't beat out the immense pain that it caused. Loki brought his hands close to his face in an attempt to tear it off, but he controlled his actions somehow and dodged sideways just in time for another one of the boy's charges to narrowly miss him. Sweat immediately formed all across Loki's body because of the terrible pain, and his vision began to blur while his mind felt like it wanted to knock itself out to escape the pain. More than the physical pain, Loki felt himself being consumed by mad ravings while his body started to bubble and wriggle from the inside. It felt like someone had put his organs into a blender and poured back the resultant slushy into his body. Loki felt terrible. Without casting a new spell, Loki jabbed his wand backwards purely out of instinct as the tip of his wand penetrated the chest of a third student who was sneaking up behind him with the knife the girl had tossed in his direction. Loki felt a splash of blood tint his fingers red, but he didn't have any sense of stability inside his mind to care about it. In a completely inefficient and pain-filled struggle, Loki pushed his spirituality out of his body, into the air, and brought his focus entirely on an explosion. In the next few moments of silence, Loki saw the girl push herself off the ground and run to him, while the boy behind him recovered from his stab and raised the knife to stab him again, while the third boy raised his wand to cast the imperious charm again. Loki felt the moments stretch to eternity, but in the blink of an eye all the three students were knocked backwards, all three hitting the walls in different directions as they collapsed, momentarily knocked out. Loki bolted, but as he did he bent low to pick up something for himself. At this moment, he could do nothing else but run. Simply keeping his illusion up, something that had been second nature to him until today, was making his breathing harder and heavier. Still under the cover of shadows, Loki ran, but given the amount of noise he was making running through the corridors, it was a surprise that he didn't get caught. He rushed into the dungeons and entered the Slytherin dorms, running into his room, before closing it and locking the room away with a wall of spirituality that he barely managed to set up. Looking around himself, Loki felt the world spin. Everything looked so distorted in his perception that he felt like he was simultaneously inside the depths of an ocean while tossed into the depths of space. Lost. His body felt like it was being compressed and expanded at the same time. With terrible focus, Loki took the 4 steps counterclockwise to enter the Saphira castle. The ravings and wailing that he heard almost made him lose control, but Loki somehow entered cogitation and prevented himself from losing control. Once inside the Saphira castle, the gray fog stirred to help his body calm down, and once he felt he was stable enough, Loki activated spirit vision and examined his body in a mirror he conjured. He could see the cut on his face, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the small web-like system of lines and cracks that had spread from the wound, all over the right side of his body. Shit, I've been corrupted. The webs were thin and looked malnourished, but Loki still felt all the pain that those web strands burrowing into his astral body caused. Grinding his teeth in pain, Loki exited the Saphira castle and arrived back inside his room. He set up a quick ritual to sacrifice the necklace of giants and, Loki poured in his spirituality to activate it. He turned on the ring filled with dawn light around himself to battle against the corruption that had grabbed hold of his body. Loki's blood sizzled and he felt his body being ripped apart, but he bit down on the chair to muffle his screams, not that anyone would hear them in the hollow castle, but because he didn't want to feel weak after beating a saint. He was being stubborn, but that was the only thing that was stopping him from breaking down into a rapid mess of sobs and tears. It was a slow but a steady process. Loki could feel the webs that were initially rapidly spreading all around his body start to recede. He could feel his astral body unentangling from the corruption. But it was far from being painless. It felt like walking through a rose bush with each thorn catching and peeling away his skin slowly. But Loki bore through it. And by the time it was morning, Loki had gotten rid of all the corruption that had occupied his body while the gray fog had healed much of it. Shit. But there was still bad news. The wound had infected Loki with the will of a god. Like when the true creator had infected Klein to make him go to and open the giant king's court to meet Saucir. As soon as Loki turned on his spirit vision, he could see something had melted inside his spirit body and become one with it. Moreover, now that he was a little more mentally stable, he could make out constant whispers inside his mind. "Come and meet me under the whomping willow tree." The line repeated ceaselessly without end. The voice that spoke it was feminine, and Loki could feel a sensual undertone in the voice that caused him to constantly have his thoughts diverted towards unleashing his desires. On the surface Loki felt free and exhilarated, as if unleashing his desires was the true purpose of his very being, as if his purpose for being born was to take part in such an act, yet in his core, Loki still felt repugnant and disgusted. The voice was plenty annoying and was constantly causing Loki to feel on edge as if something would suddenly happen and he'd lose control, but he powered through. He turned off his spirit vision and forced himself to divert his attention away from the seed. He reasoned that the more he thought about it, the likelier he was to give in to its demands. So he stayed away. Damn, they got me good. I didn't expect the Marauders' map to be wrong. Does this mean they have a way to hide from the castle wards? Well, at least they didn't completely corrupt me. The seed that was planted into me can be ignored, not for long, but for now, I can power through it. And it was good that I snagged the knife. Loki thought, looking at the bone knife that was tossed haphazardly on a table. It had blood on it. Loki felt fear looking at the knife, but he also felt satisfied that he'd gotten one over the trio of students who had attacked him. Loki closed his eyes and replayed the fight inside his mind, trying to understand what he could have done better and what he should have noticed earlier. At least I had enough sense to cover myself in shadows as soon as the fight began and didn't give up on my illusion. I doubt they'll be able to recognize me given how I didn't leave behind any blood on the scene and even change the color of the spell that I created from red to green. And because it was used in such a close range, the spell felt more like it was a variation of Bombarda instead of the typical Vermilius charm that sends out sparks. I should carry with me the blasphemy cards for a just-in-case situation so that they don't use other divination methods to find me. If my connection to the Saphira Castle was stronger, I could have used a bit of the gray fog to cover the seed of corruption inside my body so that it couldn't be used to divine anything about me. But for now, the cards of blasphemy will have to do. But if I ever get close to either of the students who were corrupted by her, I'll probably get easily found out. It's better I stay away from the room of convenience for now. I probably wouldn't be able to do anything in there anyway. The other founders also probably need something close to them like Salazar's locket. And even if I am able to quickly find an item that they need, they might just turn out to be a dud given how Salazar bailed as soon as he was woken up. Tossing the bone knife to his random pile of items and getting the cards of blasphemy to protect himself, Loki was done for the day. With a deep sigh he walked over to his bed and tried to fall asleep but couldn't because as soon as he felt his grip on reality loosening he began hearing the faint whispers that were lulling him to danger. Eventually, with no other choice, Loki blew on his whistle to call Sunny. "What do you need?" "Put me to sleep," Loki requested bluntly. "Wah, what? I do hate you for not paying me more, but I don't hate you so much that I want to kill you, human," Sunny complained, causing Loki to laugh a little. "No, it's not that. Due to some stupid reasons, I am having trouble falling asleep. I need you to force me to sleep if possible by soothing me," Loki explained, tossing a galleon towards Sunny. "I see, then you should have said that from the start. And remember, I'm not doing this for the coin, you know. I'm doing this as your friend," Sunny complained. "Oh, then give me back my galleon," Loki asked with his hand outstretched. "Do you want to remain my friend or not?" Sunny calmly asked, making Loki laugh and wave his hand. "No, I was just joking, Sunny. Who wouldn't want such a trustable and kind friend as you?" Sunny raised his chin with pride and began to use his spirituality to make the air resonate to sing various poems. Loki remained awake for about a minute, but soon after he slowly gave way to Sunny's voice as it penetrated him on a spiritual level and forced him to sleep. Waking up the next morning like he hadn't been attacked the previous night, Loki calmly took a shower, dressed himself and left for classes. "Not coming to eat breakfast with us, Loki?" Astoria asked with a sad frown on her face when she saw Loki walking in a different direction than the one that would lead them to the Great Hall. "Not for a while, Tori. I have some work to do and I'm already late." "Sorry. I will make it up to you later," Loki said, waving his hands and moving towards the kitchen. Throughout the time he spent in the castle, Loki avoided any areas that would let him brush against the 3 students who were corrupted. He didn't have any meal in the Great Hall and neither did he go to places like the library or the courtyards. Loki spent most of his time shut inside his room, behind his door, and only ever came out to attend classes to appear normal to the teachers and to Hermione, who he kept oblivious by attending classroom 2 to 21 regularly. But Loki was cooking. His mind hadn't stilled. It was constantly working with a single goal in his mind. I will come out of this. No matter what. Over the month Loki had grown to be more and more suspicious. It was all due to him remembering a single phrase Snape had uttered on the night he was corrupted. Because it is not time yet. Although Loki had skipped over the statement then, thinking it was a random thing Snape was using to brush away his question, a stray comment from Hermione made him reconsider. A month earlier, Hermione was working with Loki on the newspaper when she asked Loki a simple question: when are your new cards going to get ready? Why? Want them for your collection? Loki teased. Hermione blushed softly and she opened her mouth like a goldfish. How? Haha, although you're terrible at the game, I know you love the designs on the cards. And don't you already know? I'm a bona fide seer. Nothing can escape from my sight. Arg. Hermione stomped her foot and looked away with folded arms, but then she eventually spoke in a mumble: when are the cards going to be ready? I'm asking because I have to include a promotional article about it, not for myself. Loki smiled, amused by the girl's audacity to attempt to do damage control, so he said, not now. Why? Because it's not time yet. Loki said words that reminded him of his conversation with Snape. Not time yet. What do you mean? There's still a couple of months left for school to end. I just wanted to surprise everyone with the new cards during our last publication for this year. Sigh. Fine. Upon thinking about his conversation with Snape more carefully, Loki felt the gears in his head turn. So, Adam is waiting for something to happen. A special event. Something that she and the Aurora Order have planned to do. What would Adam need from her and the Aurora Order though? The question had irritated Loki for a few days, since he couldn't just use divination to figure out its solution by peeking at their lives, but when he did figure it out, it left him at a loss for words. The answer was staring me right in the face all this time and I didn't notice it. Tisk. I'm dumb. Loki chided himself. Although it is still a guess and not something that I have concrete evidence to support, it makes the most sense. But it isn't like I'm trusting my reasoning blindly. There's something even more damning than evidence that backs my reasoning. Beads of sweat rolled off Loki's forehead as he looked out the window and toward the Whomping Willow. Come to me. Come to me now. Loki turned his head away and went back to focusing on his work to make more cards for the Arcadia Royale. It was a hard task to constantly keep changing the meta of the game to keep players interested in the game. Just a few weeks earlier, Loki had an idea for a new series of cards which he wanted to use to surprise the players of the game at the end of school. Except his perfunctory plan shocked and scared him when he realized that one of the cards he was making rough sketched for included her. One of the cards had the drawing of a fair maiden. One that seemed tempting and elusive to get. The event reminded Loki about Klein's conversation with Emperor Russell. It was the fact that Emperor Russell had warned Klein about his warning for Klein to stay away from the moon card, suspecting it was filled with corruption from Mother Goddess of Depravity. The defiling seed that was planted into Loki's body had started to dig deeper without his knowledge. Loki hadn't even realized when the seed in him had started twisting his thoughts and perception. He had to get rid of it. But it isn't like I can just ask her to remove it like a good child and expect her to agree. A certain amount of anger was bubbling within Loki after he'd unlocked all the secrets about what the gods were doing this year. Nutters the lot of them are. How could they decide to risk the lives of all the children at school to achieve their goals? Hogwarts is the safest place in the world. I'd have to be a daft cow to believe such a thing. Even a true god. Salazar Slytherin bailed the second he was awoken, running away from the very school he and his friends created. You would expect child-risking behaviors from her and the maddened one-eyed Jesus, since they're probably mad. But not from Adam, at least. If only half the people knew about what he was trying to pull off at the school, parents would probably leave on a witch hunt to take his head. Calming himself by taking a deep breath, Loki introspected himself and checked on his potion digestion. It had risen to a whopping 82%. A total of 40% from before, when it was only 42%. This was the main reason Loki trusted his reasoning of how the events were playing out. It was only after he uncovered the secrets of the games the gods were playing out that his potion had digested to such an extent. Thinking back to the time he had figured everything out, Loki made sure that nothing about his conclusion was wrong since his plan to take advantage of the gods' games had already been set into motion. A stray thought had been the first thing that had set off a cascading ripple. What if Adam is not really the son of the ancient sun god? In that case, would the one-eyed Jesus and he truly be on the same side? Since Adam has a clear history of being born in this world and he isn't some secretive god that has lived for millennia. This thought inspired Loki to think back to what Professor Snape had casually said when Loki asked him why Dumbledore hadn't fixed the problem yet. Perhaps because it is not time yet. If I go with the theory that Adam is not really the son of the ancient sun god, then that could mean they are on opposing sides. Perhaps Adam is waiting for the right opportunity to weaken one-eyed Jesus. In that case, is he waiting for one-eyed Jesus to descend so that he can kill him and make him lose some of his Beander characteristics? Or it could also be because Adam is wondering exactly where the founders are. Perhaps he is simply waiting for her to find out and then stealing the information from her mind. Or maybe even setting up a deal to know about it. Loki thought about it for a while, a serious frown marring his face, but then he slowly shook his head. No, that seems too simple. Although that might be his aim, he could do that in other ways too. For example, fighting the true creator to weaken him. Why not just go directly to wherever his real body is kept and consume him after fighting him? I'm sure Adam has more than enough friends to be able to gang up on the guy who is currently suffering from madness. And learning about the founder's location in the castle, he is literally the headmaster of Hogwarts. I doubt that much about the castle could remain hidden from him if he truly wished. He probably already knows where they are. But he is unbothered by it or doesn't want to interfere in it. So, Adam's aim is likely to find out to use this confrontation to earn something from the two others involved. Let's start with what the true gods involved in this want. They likely want a way to regain their sanity because the method to do so is probably held by the founders, who have clearly not gone mad and still communicate with their pathway beyonders. But what would Adam do in this? If he's waiting for the right time, it is possible he expects them to fail so that he can be the sole provider of a solution for those gods. This means the right time to step into the situation for him is when the true gods give up chasing after the method to regain their sanity from the founders. Either way, things on this level are going to be dangerous and full of a key ingredient: madness. I've already suffered from the stray interest of one of them. I don't want to be dragged into it further. All I need right now is the ability to fix myself. As soon as Loki concluded this much, his potion was digested by about 15%. The rest of the 25% was when he'd figured out about her involvement in these matters. Loki deeply and clearly remembered the pattern the corruption took when he was affected by it. He remembered the web-like structure that felt almost like it was turning his soul over to the domain of an unholy creature waiting for him. The constant feeling of unburdening his desires, the constant feeling of respect and infatuation towards the sensual voice in his head while feeling disdain towards those outside, the deep sense of love and regret that followed as he continuously denied himself the relief of listening to the voice. It all made him think about a single thing. The person who had corrupted him was probably the primordial demoness. Loki could continuously feel that as long as he was not the owner of the Saphira castle, he would have been consumed and drowned by the torrential emotions of pleasure and love he felt towards the source of his corruption. But that wasn't all that Loki used to confirm for himself about the two true gods that were involved in this matter. No. Suddenly everything happening around the castle started to make more sense. Students snogging with each other in broom closets, the startline rise of discarded cigarette packs, the lazy feeling that Loki infected the entire castle with each time he tried to free Salazar Slytherin all pointed towards one of the two deities. The impromptu sickness everyone was given was likely because of the abilities of a demoness of despair who had let out a weak plague that sapped everyone's spirituality. The constant tumbling of students into degeneracy also probably indicated the realm of the true creator. Given how Loki had previously concluded that the two gods were likely trying to find a way to cure their madness, Loki assumed the sudden attacks at the school were likely just them acting out under madness. The troubles that the students might have faced could have been greater, but Loki was sure the professors and Dumbledore himself probably took the brunt force of the attacks and softened the blow through several means, both beyondner and magical. But Loki didn't stop there. With a theory on what was going on at Hogwarts this year, his mind started to form bits and pieces of a plan that would help him get rid of the corruption that had taken hold of his body. Except for his plan to be of any help, he needed to know the exact date that the gods' play would begin. And to figure this out he took a rather risky step that he wasn't willing to take before. If I am going to die sooner rather than later, I'd rather do it having tried every means of escaping, rather than die afraid and regretting the things I didn't do. And so Loki took the coin that he was given by Mr. X, and sacrificed it to the Saphira Castle. With the coin inside the Saphira Castle, Loki finally took the risk of examining it and laid it bare in front of himself, prying open all its secrets by wrapping it in his spirituality while making sure to protect his mind with the concealment rune. And to his mighty relief, he didn't get corrupted any further as he was expecting it to do. Perhaps the coin didn't corrupt anyone who would just wrap their spirituality around it, because otherwise, it would corrupt whoever made it too, or maybe there was a different reason that Loki didn't know about yet, but he was relieved nothing happened. And he was glad he did this because it gave him a direction to further dig into to understand what he was dealing with. Through his extensive exploration, Loki discovered something peculiar. The coin had an expiration date on it. Whoever had made the coin had only put in enough spirituality to last for a month more. So one-eyed Jesus will descend in a month. He'll probably descend to try and force Adam into helping him regain his sanity by taking students hostage, but that's not the main point. No, I need something else to make sure this date isn't just a fluke or a mistake. To validate this information, Loki recognized a new way he could experiment. And the object of this new experiment was none other than himself. To be more precise, it was the seed of corruption that had been planted into him after the blade scratched him. Paying close attention to the seed of corruption over the next half-month, he quickly extrapolated from the data he collected from its rate of dissolution into his body and came to find the exact date the corruption would fully meld with his body. He'd figured out the exact date it would make him fully lose control and surrender to the primordial demoness. The date was the same as the date the coin would go out of commission. It was May 31st. There was a peculiar thing about this date that furthered Loki's potion digestion by 20%. The date May 31st was roughly 9 months since September 1st, the day the school had opened. Enough time for a baby one-eyed Jesus to create a decent vessel for his descent. With their plans and motives unraveled, Loki concluded a maxim for the cryptologist sequence: the world is a stage, with all its actors involved in their own schemes and selfish desires. My role is that of the actor who uncovers the trajectory of all their fates. With that in mind, Loki worked on a plan that would guarantee his safety and help him get rid of the corruption in his body. The 5 key pillars of this plan were his acting skills, the charm he had gotten from Salazar Slytherin, Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. Each one for a different reason, was responsible for helping him successfully complete each section of the plan he had created. Harry should have gotten the little gift I sent for him already. I wonder how much longer it'll take for them to notice that he's missing. I hope I didn't drink the exhaustion potion too early. It would be awkward if I did. Loki looked out of the window of his future-telling room. His view was directed right at the Whomping Willow, a strange gleam in his eyes that trembled in anticipation at the plan he had created. Will it work? Bang! Loki! Loki! Help me! Hermione walked into the room with an exaggerated look of fear on her face. Her hands were trembling and she was taking rapid breaths. She ran here. Loki thought as a flicker of anticipation arose in his mind. What happened, Myone? Loki asked calmly, grabbing the girl by her shoulders to calm her down. He wasn't faking much since he was already quite worried about his plan working. It's Harry. Harry, Hermione started but paused to take a deep breath to fill her burning lungs with some air. What happened to Harry? Loki asked, looking right into her eyes, empathizing with her but remaining calm so that Hermione wouldn't become more worried than she already was. Harry's gone missing. I think Sirius Black has gotten him. Could you use your divination to find him, Loki? Please. Hermione rambled while Loki put on a simple smile on his face. That's what makes me the most dangerous, doesn't it? If I'm the actor that knows the trajectory of all their fates, I can manipulate them to behave exactly as I want them to. Calm down, my own, I'll do it, just calm down for a second. Hermione finally calmed down a little, taking deep breaths since Loki's admission of help comforted her. Sitting down on his chair, Loki closed his eyes after muttering a sentence 7 times. Where is Harry Potter currently located? Where is Harry Potter currently located? Where is Harry Potter currently located? Comma. Where is Harry Potter currently located? While his eyes remained closed, Loki suddenly found beads of sweat started to form on his forehead as if he was carrying out a particularly difficult task. Within moments he violently rocked on his chair as he opened his eyes with a deep gasp, trying to swallow air like he was just being drowned. Hermione's complexion paled since she had never seen such an adverse reaction from Loki. What happened, Loki? This is not good, my own. What happened? Just tell me. Harry's been put under the Imperious Curse. He's being controlled by Sirius Black, he's guiding him to the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade. There's a pathway under the Whomping Willow that goes there. Loki revealed with wide eyes. Before he could even blink his eyes, Hermione shouted a, "Thanks for the help, Loki," and rushed out of the room to find a professor. While sitting on the chair, Loki smiled. All according to the plan. Closing the door and locking it after he placed a ward on it to prevent it from being opened easily by anyone, Loki stepped inside his fortune-telling section in the room. Once inside, Loki looked out the window at the school grounds. Harry was walking like he was in a trance, taking step by step on his own as he moved towards the Whomping Willow. The sun was setting, casting an orange fiery glow over the entire tree. Loki waited by the window, watching as Harry slipped under its roots. The Marauder's map open on his table showed Loki the names of the several other characters rushing behind Harry. Dumbledore was the first to arrive at the tree as he stepped under the roots and followed behind Harry. Seeing him enter, Loki smirked. Looks like he's freaking out. I guess, I'll know exactly how he's feeling soon enough. Waiting a little more, Loki saw Hermione rushing towards the Whomping Willow along with Ron and Lupin. Soon Loki ruffled his hair and put on a worried frown on his face to appear scared. He then pulled out the flute that Snape had given him and blew on it. There was no change in his surroundings for a moment, but immediately after a sharp tear opened up beside him from which a dark bony and furry hand emerged, its nails sharp like knives. Appearing scared, Loki spoke with a soft trembling voice. Could you deliver this letter to Professor Snape, please? It's urgent. The hand of the invisible creature moved nimbly, picking up the letter in Loki's hands with its nails. Its large dark yellow eyes looked out of the tear in the fabric of space, right at Loki for a few seconds before vanishing. A little later, after the sun had fully set, Loki saw Snape and himself following everyone into the roots of the tree. A soft smile emerged on Loki's face as he watched the events proceed and his previous fear-filled face vanished like smoke from incense in the wind. In the soft darkness of the recent sunset and pink sky, Loki left from the window side and patiently performed the celestial worthy of heaven and earth ritual. Loki pulled out a simple potion he'd brewed inside the Saphira castle over the last month. Loki looked at the small vial of molten gold liquid and stared at it with a little apprehension. This is it, huh? The vial contained a potion that was still incomplete, but Loki was willing to consume it anyway, not because he wanted to fall sick or something, but because he had to rush to make this incomplete potion that would enhance a single aspect of his abilities. Uncorking the vial, Loki quickly drank the entire potion in a single gulp, before closing his eyes and crewing the effects. A few minutes ago, a little before Harry Potter entered the roots of the Whomping Willow. What's happening? Harry exclaimed inside his head as he watched from his eyes his body move unnaturally and beyond his control. No matter how hard he tried to resist, he couldn't regain control over his body. He tried shouting for help, making even the smallest twitch on his body, yet he couldn't move. Did someone use the imperious curse on me? Was it Sirius Black? Is he going to kill me just like how he killed my parents? Where is he taking me? Although Harry was fuming on the inside, externally, he looked totally normal. His body marched with steady steps, passing by Hagrid's hut without even a single call escaping him, alerting Hagrid for help. Soon Harry recognized he was stepping towards the Whomping Willow, causing him to feel a little fear. I remember Fred and George telling me this was one way out of Hogwarts, but it was blocked because of the Whomping Willow. Does Sirius Black know of this secret passageway? Where am I being taken? Will Headmaster Dumbledore be able to find me? Is this all happening because of that coin? The Whomping Willow did not attack Harry as he expected it to. It looked like it was asleep, uncaring for anyone who was using the passageway underneath it. Harry's body walked through the roots of the tree and descended into the depths of the secret pathway that seemed to stretch beyond them. The walk for the next 15 minutes was dark and uncomfortable. Harry could barely see anything inside the tunnel as he tried his best to make out the faint outlines of whatever was in front of him. Soon Harry saw a faint glimmer of light in the distance, and within moments he arrived by its side. A bright torch was on fire and lit up the surroundings under the roots, where Harry found himself looking at a beautiful young girl who had a bloated abdomen and looked like she was pregnant. Yet she appeared extremely delicate and beautiful, like a flower dancing in the wind. Harry lost his mind simply by looking at her, without recognizing it himself. Her hair reached her ankles and appeared perfectly silky, like streams of clear water running across stones. Her hands looked delicate and the fiery flames painted her cheeks with an almost reddish blush. The girl's hands trembled slightly as they brushed over her belly while she looked at it with a mesmerizing smile. Had Loki been here, he would have recognized the girl as Mary Jackson. She wasn't this pretty when he'd first seen her, but her facial structure was indiscernibly the same. But what was distinctly different from her usual self right now was the unique way with which she carried herself. She looked proud. Her shoulders were soft but squared, and she stood as if there was nothing that could realistically harm her. There was a maddened look in her eyes, as if she were waiting in anticipation for the fruition of something that would happen soon. Something she had painstakingly prepared for a long while. The entire area was covered in what looked like spider webs, which made Harry think that no one had bothered to ever come down here, making him feel exceedingly eerie. Will I be killed here and no one will ever know? The flames on the torch flickered and the shadows danced. A sweet smell invaded Harry's nose as the girl walked closer to him. It felt sedating and comforting, yet something about her made Harry feel afraid. "Hello, young man. I've been waiting for you," the girl said, caressing Harry's face slowly. Although the girl with a seductive smile should have made Harry feel comfortable and safe, he felt nothing but pure unadulterated fear when he felt her ice-cold hands touch him. She looked into Harry's eyes and appeared to be looking into something much deeper than just his eyes. She seemed to be peering into his soul. Harry tried to scream and kick around in his mind to escape from the clutches of the girl in front of him, but all his attempts went wasted since he wasn't able to control his body. Suddenly the girl who was cuddling his face froze and a prominent frown appeared on her face. It's not you. You were not the boy that I was supposed to gain." Suddenly the girl looked at her stomach and then cursed at the baby inside. "This is not what you promised. You said he was destined to be connected with him. You said he was his blessed. You said I would be able to prevent him from returning." The girl was turning more and more frantic with each statement she uttered. "What do you mean you hadn't anticipated this? I spent an entire year searching for them, so that I could get my hands on his blessed." The girl suddenly in a fit of anger started to slam her fist into her own stomach. Thud asterisk thud asterisk thud asterisk slap asterisk slap asterisk slap. Bad, bad, bad baby. Harry was certain he could hear the whimpering of a child from inside the girl's body, but although a part of him was shocked, appalled and even more afraid, Since he couldn't comprehend which girl would beat her own baby, most of him was supportive of the girl and her actions. He felt like whatever she did was meant to be done. He felt like she was the only thing that was right with the world. And you? Who are you? What do you have to do with him? The girl looked at Harry with a fierce frown on her face. Harry suddenly felt like his heart had frozen and shattered when he looked at the beautiful girl frowning while looking at him as if he'd broken the heart of an inconsolable young maiden. He felt worse than a bum who'd taken advantage of his wife's money to gamble some more. However, Harry suddenly felt reprieve. All of a sudden he felt like the girl in front of him was no longer as pretty as before, returning the control over his thoughts back to him. That will be enough. A sudden voice distracted her and made Harry mentally sigh in an excited relief. Professor Dumbledore. Oh, this boy is worth enough to bring you out of your shell, Albus. The girl said with a polite smile, her eyes glimmering with mischief as she re-evaluated Harry standing in front of her. Maybe, I should make this boy mine then. The girl asked as she looked at Dumbledore, giving him a coy smile. Believe me when I say this will not end well for you, Dumbledore warned as a feeling of suppression spread from his body causing Harry to feel lightheaded. Oh, you are willing to go to such an extent. The girl said, her smile deepening. You've only been able to stay hidden here because you remain on no side. It would do best if you remembered this fact. Are you threatening me, Albus? After all I've done for you. After I worked tirelessly to help you bait out the boy who you desire to meet so much. The girl asked with a sickening smile after she pretended to feel shocked. Dumbledore's eyes glimmered dangerously as he looked at the girl. How I wish you were really here. Oh, why's that? Has my charm finally started to affect you too? The girl asked with a cruel smile. Like it did your lover all the times before. Dumbledore turned silent, but his lips turned thin. It was the first time since he'd known Dumbledore had Harry seen him angry. He could practically feel the hostility being radiated off of him. And it made him all the more worried to be close to the girl he was standing with as if he'd be caught in their crossfire. But Dumbledore managed to control his anger quite well since he asked a simple question once again. The Founders won't help you. But I can. You should know by now how stubborn they are about their ways. I know what I'm doing, Albus. At least I'm not like you who was abandoned like an orphan. Oh. Suddenly two more students, Ron and Hermione, walked into the area along with Professor Lupin, but surprisingly they ignored Dumbledore, Harry and the strange girl as if they didn't exist at all and continued walking deeper into the tunnel. After which Snape and Loki rushed into the darkness of the tunnels, similarly ignoring everyone present there. Looks like there are a lot of people worried about this boy. It makes me want to take him for myself even more. It is my protection that keeps you hidden from her. Dumbledore said with a certain finality. Is that a threat, Albus? Are you really willing to compromise the future because of a single boy? The girl asked in a fierce tone. Her face held a deep prominent frown and her hands clenched into fists. Just a reminder. The girl's frown suddenly turned into an amusing smile as she spoke softly. So much for your act of being the White Lord. I guess darkness is the only thing that's eternal. Why don't the two of you join hands then? Aren't you becoming similar? The girl said, placing her hand on her bloated stomach. I mean, what do you think is faster? Me giving birth, or me losing control? He is quite eager to meet you, I think. He hasn't been able to remain quiet ever since I told him that you need our help for your little project. Don't you, Albus? Aren't you planning to overthrow the Founders too? Betraying them like they betrayed you? Albus and the girl stared at each other for quite a while before a sudden voice interrupted them both. Cheek. Who would have guessed it'd be the man-turned-girl that was hiding behind the old man like a rat all this time? The girl immediately turned towards the man who somehow none of them had noticed until this point in time. There was a tense moment of silence in which the girl's eyes widened in horror. She spared a glance at Dumbledore that confirmed that he didn't know who this Purse monster was. The man was standing with the support of his silver cane and had a golden monocle on his right eye, the only eye that was currently open and looking at them. Before anyone could react, the webs in the area wound into sharp spears piercing the man's body. Ha ha ha, What a cute little welcome for me, Cheek, the man said while laughing at the silky white spears that had pierced him. Harry, who was afraid for the man, watched in absolute shock as not even a single drop of blood escaped from his body. I was wondering which numbskull it was that tried to corrupt my blessed and color me surprised. I didn't expect it to be you, Cheek. Tisk, tisk, tisk. There was silence for a moment that not even Dumbledore chose to break. Dumbledore simply looked at Cheek and then at the new man carefully and analyzed him a little slowly. He wore black knee-high boots, a dark robe and a pointed black hat, while the most intriguing of all was the golden monocle fixed over his right eye. "Who are you?" the woman asked as she glared at the man who hadn't introduced himself yet. "I doubt you don't know me, so I assume this is just your attempt at performing humor, though your jokes are just as bad as ever. But I shall humor you. My name's Eamon, or maybe you could call me Mr. Error. Worry not, I won't do anything bad to you. Aren't we all on the same side? Against those pesky outer gods." The girl trembled slightly, and Dumbledore, performing his role of a spectator, noticed it easily. But seeing Cheek stuck in her position as if she'd seen a ghost, Dumbledore asked the next question, "Who? What? I've been away for a few years and the two of you've already forgotten me. I understand you haven't had as much time as me in this world, but you still haven't learned anything about me. Just how weak are you guys? And you still decided to mess with my blessed." Naive, the man shook his head in an amused disappointment. There was silence in the air as Eamon finished his rant, but seeing no recognition from him, he spoke again. "And here I thought Cheek, being your acquaintance, would have told you a little about me. Tisk. I gave you more credit than you deserve. Foolish kids. I guess the founders were right in ignoring you for the numbskulls you are." Dumbledore's eyes widened at the random information drop, and he almost immediately pulled out his wand and waved a spell out of it. A red bolt of light flew at blinding speed, traveling through the air until it reached Eamon, who just swatted it away with his staff like he was casually waving away a fly from his face. The spell landed on the roots behind Eamon and instantly exploded into a fiery inferno, which Dumbledore had to wave his wand to direct away from them, since although they could bear it, Harry's body would have been burnt to ash. "Is that a way to treat someone who's speaking?" Eamon asked with a polite frown on his face. It was at that moment that Cheek swiped her hand and caused a wave of black flames to flow over Eamon. Except when she waved her hands, nothing came out of them. "What are you trying to do with waving your arms in the air?" Eamon asked, looking like he was puzzled, and then his lips moved up ominously as he waved his hand. "Did you want to make these flames?" And caused a small black flame to appear in it. You're really here?" the woman gasped as she took a step back. Dumbledore too was looking at the man with a slight frown, yet he appeared to be far more composed than Cheek, who was clearly panicking as her hands trembled in fear. As expected of a spectator. "My blessed told me you've been tormenting him all year, Cheek. He told me you keep trying to get him to surrender to you. He said if he wouldn't come to you, you would have caused him to lose control." Eamon looked at the woman with narrowed eyes, and then with a dangerous glint in them he asked, "Is that true, Cheek? Did you really do this?" Cheek composed herself and spoke with a kind smile that gave her the aura of a kind elder sister who cared very much for you. "I wouldn't have done anything if I knew he was your blessed. I need to charm him. That's the only way to leave." I understand," Eamon said, as if having been charmed by the girl's attempt, which caused her smile to deepen, except that was when he said, "But I suppose punishments do. So that you don't even think about repeating what you just tried to do to me." Eamon then adjusted his monocle and, with a sinister smile that promised he was up to no good, suddenly vanished from in front of the three people. "Where did he go?" Cheek immediately asked Dumbledore with a sense of despair on her face. Just as Dumbledore was about to reply, his eyes shifted to her protruding belly, and Cheek's attention shifted to it too. "Oh, he is ready to come out. I guess he wanted to meet him too," Cheek said sarcastically as she, carefully, caressed her belly by punching it. "Who is? No, I'm not talking about him. I'm leaving. You can handle the aftermath, whatever it is. I'm not going to get involved in this further." The warning was enough for me. You are under my protection. Ha! I knew you'd try and bring this up again. What do you think I've been doing all year? Sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I've figured out how to reach the founders, they can keep me safe from her. But you know what? It doesn't matter how hard you try. You will never be able to keep me safe from him. Dumbledore frowned deeply. He is stronger than her. Dumbledore's lips turned thin and shifted into a frown, and just when he was about to open his mouth again, the weight in Cheek's belly shifted. There was a splash of water that made her robes wet, after which suddenly something fell out in between her legs. Stepping back a little, Cheek allowed a small pink-faced baby to come into view. The baby's hands danced around in the air for a few seconds before its mouth opened, and instead of a cry, a shrill scream of death erupted. Cheek stepped back and shielded herself while Dumbledore immediately rushed in and dragged Harry away from the center, protecting him just as his body began to spasm and mutate. Harry suddenly lost consciousness when Dumbledore pointed his wand at him. Once Harry was safe, Dumbledore walked back toward the baby. Cheek was bleeding because of the terrible speed at which the baby separated from her, but her eyes constantly scanned around the area as if she was afraid of suddenly being eaten alive by her shadows. I can't leave this body behind. I've suffered enough from doing so once. She quickly pulled out a mirror from her pocket and tossed it into the air. Her hand punched towards it and she was about to enter it and escape away into the mirror world when saw Dumbledore place Harry a little away and walk towards the now transforming baby. Dumbledore looked at the baby and calmly flicked his hand. Cheek's vision suddenly blurred as she felt her sea of subconscious suddenly be hit by a storm. Her body bubbled as her hair flew into the air as if it were alive and trying to rush away from her head. Dumbledore had used the ability, Mind Storm. It caused a storm in the sea of subconscious surrounding them. It was a hard ability to deal with for demigods since there were plenty of weak points in one's psychic body. Especially in gods who were already maddened. It made them easily hear the sounds of at least 1,000 people screaming knowledge into their ears. It was torture. Especially when the knowledge itself was corrupted from beings both on the planet and from deep within the cosmos. As if someone had pressed the fast-forward button on the baby's life, along with its scream, and its features started to change. First, its reddish skin slowly turned pale, and then its height and weight started to increase. Slowly the baby was no longer a baby but appeared as a toddler that stood on his 2 legs. After which with his first step he raised his hand. It was at this point that both Cheek and Dumbledore froze in their spot as they realized something was wrong. The toddler with its arms extended screamed and wailed in the most unholy way imaginable. Both Cheek and Dumbledore immediately understood that the cry was no longer a cry of pain from corruption but one of fear. The ability Dumbledore had used wasn't strong enough to cause this effect. Even if it was a maddened god. This was the scream of someone fighting death. The toddler grew, passing from about 4 years old to about 10 in an instant, and then slowly until it aged to 13 before it slowly moved rapidly towards the age of 25. Clothes sprouted out of nowhere and covered the man who had long stopped screaming with his head bowed low as thin black hair fell on his face and covered the eyes on his face that were further hidden by his tall white hat from everyone else. Dumbledore clenched his wand tighter while Cheek gulped audibly. That was when the man finally opened his eyes as a mischievous smirk played on his lips. His fingers twirled as a golden monocle formed in between his fingers which he calmly placed on his right eye. And then the man looked at Dumbledore and Cheek, opened his mouth, speaking for the first time, as he simply said, "Boo." Chills traveled up Cheek's and Dumbledore's spine, but the man cared little for it and conjured a cane in his hand that produced a crisp talk as it was tapped on the ground while he walked away. "That's your punishment for hurting my blessed. Be careful next time, I might not let you leave with your sanity intact." And before Cheek could recover from her shock or react to what had happened in any way, shape or form, the man vanished from in front of her eyes as if he were the wind. As if he never existed. Beside her Dumbledore was watching with furrowed brows as he mumbled, he didn't have a body of heart and mind. A few meters away inside the castle, the man appeared out of thin air and before anyone could see him, he went on his merry way, walking towards the second floor. Once in front of room 2-21, He easily unlocked the door just by tapping his wand and letting out a bit of his spirituality in a particular pattern. He entered the room, locked it just like it had been a few seconds ago and stepped in front of the body of a young boy who was standing in a weird posture. It looked like the body was postured and frozen while mid-stride. Suddenly the cane, the monocle and the clothes the man was wearing vanished, creating a peculiar outcome as his facial structure changed and now looked completely different than it did before. The peculiar thing about the frozen boy inside the room was that he looked like a nearly exact replica of the naked boy who had entered after his face morphed. The naked boy quickly set up an altar and performed a sacrificial ritual. His item to sacrifice was the body of the boy who was standing frozen in a weird posture. Taking 4 steps counterclockwise, the boy's spirit body vanished as he entered the Saphira Castle. Gasp! As soon as the naked boy entered the Saphira Castle, he gasped and took a deep breath. Woo! I freaking did it! Dropping to his knees, Loki let out a guttural shout that stirred the gray fog, causing it to rumble as waves spread out around him. Loki hadn't felt so much joy in a long time. He almost felt he'd fall unconscious because of how happy he was feeling and how much adrenaline was being pumped around his body right now. Quickly responding to the crimson star which was pulsating to represent his prayer, Loki moved into the real world and picked up the sacrifice he had made, his older body, while leaving behind all the clothes on it, and brought it into the Saphira Castle. With his old body back in his grasp, Loki started to relax since there was not much that could go wrong from now on. Looking at his hands, Loki continued to repeatedly clench and unclench them. I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I pulled that off. Loki's plan had been simple. From the moment he figured out the answer to the question, what was Adam waiting for from her in the Aurora Order, Loki had immediately thought of his plan. It was a gamble, one that Loki was literally willing to bet his life on. His plan was simple. He would swindle the primordial demoness and the true creator by using the charm that Salazar Slytherin had given him and use the new body of the true creator as his own body. This was possible because Salazar Slytherin had handed him the Fate Siphon charm. He would use it to swap their fates during the true creator's time of rebirth. The plan was a gamble. But a gamble that Loki did his best to turn into a perfect plan. To swindle the primordial demoness and the true creator, he first needed to distract them because he could in no way, shape or form put up any resistance if they actually tried to capture or harm him. And his distraction was simple. It was Dumbledore. He would use the coin that Mr. X had given him to corrupt Harry and make the primordial demoness control him to bring him into the Whomping Willow. And if Harry went into the Whomping Willow, that was where Dumbledore would go. Then he would use a sacrificial ritual to float out of the castle using his spiritual body and float over to the spot where Dumbledore, Cheek and the true creator were meeting after having accommodated the error card of blasphemy to forcefully rise to sequence 6 Prometheus. Once there, he would just have to find the opportune moment to activate the charm and switch his fate with the true creator and take over his body. The plan wasn't foolproof, yet. It had too many variables. One of them, for example, was that either Cheek or Dumbledore would attack him and blow his cover when he wouldn't be able to defend against them. But Loki was slightly prepared for this. Physical attacks like the one Cheek pulled off by transforming her spider webs into spears wouldn't work because he was in his spirit body. Another variable was that Cheek and Dumbledore would recognize that he wasn't a true god because he had no suppression aura. But Loki fixed this by using the error blasphemy card. Simply by using this card, he immediately gave himself a partial divinity aura that would stand surface level inspection. But what about magical or Beander attacks that could touch his spirit? Loki covered that aspect too, because holding onto the card of blasphemy for the error pathway, bumped his own sequence up by 1. It gave him the ability of the next sequence, Prometheus. It gave him the ability to steal Beander's abilities, which was how he managed to steal Cheek's black flames. He could also now see the runic composition of spiritual abilities like Beander abilities and magic. So when combined with his eloquence of languages, he could see their weaknesses. Allowing Loki to catch onto the weak point of Dumbledore's spell and redirect it by tossing it in a different direction. But there was a problem that Loki hadn't considered. Loki assumed that the corruption induced in him by Cheek would be enough to hold the true creator back after he swapped bodies with him and so activated the charm. What he hadn't anticipated was the true creator resisting the effects of the charm and managing to overpower it to obliterate Loki when his soul tried to wrestle away the control of his body. Once Loki was in the body of the baby, he immediately felt a second consciousness inside the body, the consciousness of the true creator. And so did the true creator. But the true creator was slightly shocked to discover that there was someone else inside the body he had spent months fleshing out to be his perfect vessel. Loki used this moment of shock to use the baby's body to kick Cheek on the inside and then focus entirely on the concealment rune to keep his mind shut from any corruption that might get induced by the true creator's screams. But Loki knew this wasn't enough. His soul, which was right by the soul of the true creator, was laid bare and helpless, waiting to be attacked and killed or worse, corrupted. But it was at this point that Loki felt a calming wave of energy pass over him. It was Dumbledore, who at the last moment of his transformation attempted to attack him with a mental attack. But because Loki's body of heart and mind was concealed with the concealment rune and the true creator's soul was that much more prominent, the attack fell on the true creator. It forced him to shift his attention, and Loki used this moment in full stride as he took direct control of the baby's body while Dumbledore's attack duked it out with the true creator. Others would have claimed that Loki stealing Cheek's ability and being able to deflect Dumbledore's attack and Dumbledore's mental attack helping him was lucky. But it was not. Or rather, it was not unplanned luck. Since Loki had drunk a partially enhanced Felix Felicis, the luck potion, before he embarked on this journey. However, the potion wasn't complete in the traditional sense since it took nearly 6 months to make the potion using normal methods. Loki only had half a month, but with his mastery of potions, it was perfected differently. The potion he made was perfected to work only in conditions when death was a guarantee if it didn't work. So the potion would always save him until he was on a path of sure death. It was a delicate balance and a nerve-wracking adventure that Loki did not want to go on again. I don't know if I was just really lucky or not. But whatever it was, I don't want to do it again. But this is just phase 1. Now I need to go through with phase 2 to perfect my alibi. Just a little bit more and this will be perfect. Dropping the error blasphemy card onto the table, Loki exited the Saphira castle. Once outside, he wore the clothes he had borrowed from his previous body and immediately set out of the room. With short but quick steps, Loki walked towards the Gryffindor tower. He set up a short ward that would produce a loud noise upon being activated and walked toward the closest exit from the tower. He waited there patiently for about half an hour while consulting with the Marauder's map every few minutes to see if his target was walking back to the castle. It didn't take long. Loki soon saw Harry Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Severus Snape along with Peter Pettigrew, Hermione Granger and Ronald Weasley appear on the map. Curiously, a different name also existed on the map which was moving along with the somewhat large group of people, Loki. They were heading straight back to the Gryffindor tower. Loki quickly used illusions to hide under the cover of darkness inside a broom closet as he held his breath and waited. The sound of shuffling footsteps reached his ears, but Loki did not emerge from his hiding spot. A sliver of gap in the broom closet was all he used to carefully peer through the darkness and look at who was passing by. Bang! SSSSRREEEECCCCHHHHHHH. A loud noise distracted everyone for a second, which was enough for Loki to open the door and pull Hermione into the closet as soon as she walked past him. Hermione attempted to scream, but Loki held her mouth and brought out his wand and cast a dim Lumos charm, making a light that was just bright enough for Hermione to see him. "My own. It's me," Loki said, slowly letting go of Hermione's mouth. "Huh." Hermione appeared shocked. But you were just." "Yes. I know, that's why I need your help." "Help? But I'm not a Bayo, no way." "You knew all along," Hermione suddenly whispered harshly. I mean, I'm a seer, it wasn't that hard to figure out what you were using to get around to so many of your classes," Loki said, shrugging his shoulders. Hermione's mouth opened and closed like a fish for a few seconds. There was a sense of frustration that lay in her gaze as she looked at Loki, but then she spoke slowly. "I'm coming with." "No. I only saw myself traveling alone." Loki immediately shut down the thoughts Hermione was having. "But, you know the rules, Myone. You don't mess with time as you like. You're one to tell me. I should be telling Professor McGonagall that you knew about it all along." "Please," Loki said with a funny smile. Whatever you want. You don't tell me anything anyway," Hermione said, pulling out the golden chain around her neck and wrapping it around Loki. Although Loki felt a little weird about her last remark, he shouted a "thanks" and immediately pushed her back out of the broom closet while whispering into her ear, "Go to the women's lavatory. I planned for you to meet everyone over there. They'll be distracted by something else, so you can go ahead of them." "The women's lavatory. Shameless. How did you go in there?" Hermione complained. Loki just laughed and said, "Myrtle is a good friend. Charming, aren't I?" Hermione rolled her eyes and did as Loki told while leaving him to his devices. With Hermione gone, Loki looked at the little hourglass at the end of the pendant Hermione had given him and covered it with his spirituality. Then, while holding its knob, he turned it once, turning the hourglass inside its gyroscopic container once too. Loki felt a smooth shift. The light that entered the broom closet through the crack shifted and spun as if Loki was thrust into a ride through the rainbow. The sound that filled Loki's ears felt like he was listening to an orchestra under the pool. In but a moment more, everything stabilized and Loki sighed audibly. He pushed open the broom closet and stepped out calmly after pressing out any creases that might have formed on his robes. Walking a little in the corridor, Loki came to rest at the exit from where he could step into the grounds of the castle. Not long after, Loki heard soft footsteps burden his ears, causing him to turn around and look at who had arrived. "Oh, Professor Snape, so glad you were able to make it. I suppose you've read my letter." "Yes," Snape said after looking at Loki with some seriousness. "I saw Ron and Hermione entering the pathway under the Whomping Willow along with Professor Lupin." A scowl formed on Snape's face, but he said nothing else and started to walk ahead. "I'm coming along, Professor, just in case I'm needed to do something," Loki said in a slightly unsure voice, making Snape pause and look at him. But then Snape said nothing and just looked away after a short nod. Loki internally smiled and, without wasting any more time, began to follow Professor Snape as they walked under the Whomping Willow. As they walked closer to the Whomping Willow, Loki saw Snape wave his hands and shoot a freezing charm at a particular spot on the tree, causing it to freeze while they quickly stepped through the tunnel under the tree. Walking in silence, Loki felt goosebumps rise up his arms as he passed by the area he remembered was where Dumbledore, Harry and Cheek were. Even though he mentally recognized the area around him, he couldn't see a single one of them without the rune of concealment covering his mind. But Loki maintained his composure and continued to follow Snape, who hadn't indicated he could see anything else otherwise. Walking through the darkness, Loki found himself stopping a little behind Snape when he froze stiff. In the silence, Loki could hear the argument between two students. "Where's Harry? Serious? I don't know Lupin. Why do you think I took him?" "Because my friend is a seer and he saw you guiding Harry using the Imperious Curse." Loki held his breath like Snape and paid attention to the conversation that was going on inside the Shrieking Shack. Counting down, Loki soon found himself tensing as he slipped into cogitation, and it was a good thing he did, because an unholy scream filled the tunnel, reaching Loki and Snape, who were both immediately feeling the effects of losing control. But the scream vanished as soon as it arrived. Snape immediately turned around and looked into the depths of darkness beside Loki while Loki did the same. Turning around and looking at Snape, Loki raised his eyebrows in worry, indicating he was asking for what he should do next. Snape just raised his finger and silenced him by putting the finger on his lips. That was when a confused voice came out of the Shrieking Shack. "Blimey, what was that?" Suddenly, a crisp crack was heard behind Loki and Snape inside the darkness of the tunnel, but before they could react or even turn around they felt a wave of calmness pass over them. Loki and Snape froze on the spot as their eyes closed while their brains stopped functioning for a few moments. Snap! Loki opened his eyes along with Snape and the two remained silent, as if nothing had just happened, paying full attention to the argument that was going on in the Shrieking Shack. "I know why you brought me here," Harry said accusingly. As soon as Loki heard Harry's voice, a calm smile spread to his lips. He wiped it away from his face just as quickly, however. "Looks like Adam took the bait. He rearranged things to happen according to his plot for the year." Snape pulled out his wand and calmly swung it to cause the door to open soundlessly. No one noticed the door opening since it was behind a bend, allowing Snape to enter the Shrieking Shack with soft steps, his wand pointed at Sirius Black, who was looking away from him. "Just give him to us, Harry. We can prove it," Lupin pleaded. "Prove what? That you're here to kill me. To finish the work that you left unfinished 13 years ago. The night you killed my parents," Harry screamed while Hermione and Ron kept their wands pointed at Sirius and Lupin. "No, Harry. He isn't after you. If only you'd let us prove ourselves," Lupin pleaded once again, but before Harry could speak a third voice interrupted them all. "I've been trying to explain to the headmaster that you've been helping your friend enter the castle, Lupin. A shame he isn't here to personally see just how much you've let him down," Snape exhumed in a serious tone with a smirk on his face. Sirius and Lupin immediately turned around and so did the children. "Severus." Sirius spat as his face, which was scowling and maddened, somehow turned even uglier. "Why am I not surprised? Come to ruin someone else's life." "Black." Snape spat back, his wand pointed right at Sirius. "And what are you here for? Make new sacrifices in the name of your madness." Both Sirius and Severus wore deep scowls on their faces as they looked at each other. Now, why don't the two of you calm down?" Lupin tried to be the voice of reason within the brewing conflict, but the two immediately shut him down without even looking at him. "Shut it." Eventually, Loki slipped out of the corner behind Severus and peeked his head into the room. "What is everyone doing?" Loki asked as he looked at the three parts the room had inadvertently gotten divided into. "Loki," Hermione said with some excitement. "Has it not been solved yet?" Loki asked, looking at Hermione. "No. They keep telling us that they want to prove something to us. They're trying to trap Harry. I hadn't expected Professor Lupin would join them too, but," Hermione rambled on until her eyes shifted from Loki and fell upon Professor Snape, who just sneered. "So you figured it out too. You hid it well, Miss Granger." Snape praised. "You've almost made me happy enough to give you 5 points for Gryffindor." Loki looked at Snape with a sense of betrayal, his mouth agape, but Lupin interrupted once again. "Please, let's keep out personal biases for other races out of this. This is a question of life and death. Let us show it. Let us prove it. Look, I don't even have my wands out. I can't possibly harm you." "We both know that's not true," Severus said with a frown while keeping his wand pointed at Lupin, whose eyes widened since Snape was hinting at their Beander abilities. "What does he mean, Professor?" Harry asked while keeping his wands trained at Lupin and Sirius. "You don't need to drag them into. The headmaster has kept them blinded for long enough. Their stupidity has led them into enough situations where their ignorance remains at the crowns of their heads." Snape said each word with pause, his tone strict and his chin lifted in arrogance and pride. "James and Lily wouldn't have want," Sirius started, but Snape interrupted him ruthlessly. "You wouldn't know what Lily would have wanted even for the life of another. You filthy traitor." Snape spat, his anger palpable while Sirius recoiled in horror at having been reminded of something. All the children in the room became shocked seeing how Snape lost control, his eyes had turned red and his hands trembled. Snape's overall calm or spite didn't show, he looked angry and no child knew why. "You knew my mother, Professor?" Harry asked softly, creating a tense pause where no one spoke, everyone waiting for Snape's next words. "She was a Beander. In the same pathway as me," Snape finally said, his voice trembling, recalling faint memories he held close to his heart. "A Beander. Harry asked as he turned around and looked at Hermione, and for the first time even she didn't have a proper answer to something a teacher had said. Snape looked at them for a while and then spoke softly. Did you never think how your very dear friend, Loki, got his ability to peer into the future from Miss Granger? Loki's eyes widened and he looked at Snape sharply for dragging him into it but didn't say anything to interrupt him. How a normal student who doesn't stand out in much else than his academics can suddenly tell people's fortunes? Snape asked again. I thought it was just a bloodline ability, like Professor Trelawney. Hermione said, unsure. Bloodline. I thought you were better. Do you really think the purebloods have superior bloodlines? When the dunderhead in your group is one. Everyone looked at Ron, who uncomfortably squirmed under their gazes. Beyonders gain their abilities by drinking potions of their corresponding pathways. There are 19 officially recognized pathways, each different, unique in its own way. Your friend here has drunk the potion corresponding to the mystery prior pathway. The children all looked at Loki, who just glared at Snape, but nodded softly after looking at them. I did drink the potion for the mystery prior. It gave me the mystical ability to perform divinations. I'm a Beander. Hermione's mouth hung loose, as did Harry's and Ron's. I didn't know, Hermione said softly. It was meant to be a secret. Loki said as he carried on Snape's explanation from there. Beyonders keep their identities a secret, not only because normal people would grow jealous of them. Loki paused and looked at Sirius and Lupin. But also because it can help us in tough situations since our abilities do not require the use of a wand. Like them, Loki said, pointing at the two with his wand. They could very well be Beyonders and hurt you without their wands. Loki ended his explanation and looked at Hermione. Ah! Hermione had an epiphany, causing everyone to look at her. You mean Professor Lupin? What's wrong with Professor Lupin? Harry asked innocently. Hermione looked around the room as she looked at Lupin seriously and a little scared, but then she gulped down her fear as she spoke out. He doesn't need a wand to hurt us because he's a Beander of the werewolf sort. Loki frowned since he had known about it, but he was pretty sure Adam wouldn't have allowed Lupin into the school if he wasn't a good guy. And all his experiences, from the train to the classes and the help Lupin had given him regarding the Patronus charm, were all nice and made him stand out from the Dada professors who had arrived at Hogwarts before. Yet to keep up the pretense, Loki kept his wand trained on Lupin. Also because he was on Snape's team through and through, even though he'd revealed his identity of being a Beander. The room had stumbled on a deafening silence after Hermione's words as everyone looked at Lupin to see his reaction. Sigh. I know it seems as if I'm this big bad monster that's out to get you, but I promise, it's not like that, Lupin said, wiping his face with his hands. Raising his hands behind his head, Lupin looked at Sirius and suggested he copy him too. With both of them holding their hands above their heads, Lupin spoke. We'll take steps backwards until we reach the end of the room, all while Professor Snape here keeps his wand trained on me. And what do you want us to do? Harry asked. The rat that's hanging around in his pocket, Sirius said quickly, pointing at Ron, but then put away his hand so that they wouldn't think he was attacking them. Scabbers? Ron asked with confusion as he pulled out the rat from his pocket and into his hands. What did he ever do to you? Lupin looked at Professor Snape and then spoke. How about you do the honors, Severus? Blaming your defection on rats. What more could I even XP? Snape started but was interrupted by Lupin. Please, Severus. This is important. Wouldn't you like to know who actually betrayed James and Lily? Snape's eyes instantly widened and raged with anger, but he kept calm and held himself as he found the right words to speak. What do you want me to do? Snape asked, but instead of Lupin responding, it was Loki who spoke first. An animagus. The room fell into a confused silence once again as everyone looked at Sirius and Lupin. You'll know when you see it yourself. Now why don't you place him in the center of the room, Ron? All of a sudden, Ron shouted, ouch. Everyone saw the rat jump out of his hands and rush towards the exit under Snape's feet. Just as Snape raised his wand to capture the rat, a fairly large gate appeared in the center of the room. It had a bone frame while an ethereal white veil appeared in its center. The gate had incredible sucking power. The wooden floorboards tore out of the ground and were sucked into it, the roof caved in and tore away, revealing the full moon outside. Everyone held onto the closest thing they could to prevent themselves from being sucked into whatever gateway had just appeared. Sirius and Lupin dove towards the students and held them down since they weren't strong enough to hold their own. Fortunately, Loki held onto the door that he had used to get into the shack and closed it just in time before the rat could escape outside. But under his stunned gaze, the rat jumped into the air, completely unaffected by the suction of the gate that looked like it led to the underworld, and began to transform. Much like his own transformation from a baby to a man in a few seconds, the rat transformed into a short, petite, bald man whose teeth were all crooked. During the time the man transformed, Loki looked around trying to search for something that would help him, but to his misfortune, he only saw Lupin's body mutating. Is he losing control? Because of the full moon outside. The rat had finally finished transforming and he dashed right at Loki in an attempt to push him away, but just in time as the man was about to touch Loki, a blinding flash of darkness caused everyone to stop. The shadows cast by the full moon outside grew and wrapped around the small bald man. But to everyone's dismay, the bald man immediately transformed into a rat again, sprinting in a completely different direction. The extensions of shadows immediately vanished as Professor Snape broke into a cloud of bats that all crashed into the rat and lifted it entirely off the ground. The pain that came from being pinched in a bat's mouth must have startled the rat, because the door that was sucking everyone and everything into it vanished. Professor Snape's body reformed holding the rat, but just before everyone could calm down they heard a threatening growl. Out of fear, everyone looked at Professor Lupin, or rather the werewolf, who was now drooling above Hermione's hair. Hermione, Harry and Ron waited with bated breath as Loki wondered, did he lose control? But to everyone's surprise, Professor Lupin was growling at the rat. Seeing it firm in Professor Snape's grasp, the werewolf started to recede, and soon only the man who Professor Lupin was remained. Everyone let out an audible sigh of relief. Do you believe us now, Snape? Lupin asked as soon as he was back. Yes, Snape said, but everyone could see how angry he was. Who is that man, Professor? Harry whispered in horror. Did my rat just turn into a bald man? Everyone heard Ron mumble, clearly traumatized given how he was close to puking. Peter Pettigrew. The man I'm accused of killing and the man I will make sure I kill today. Sirius growled with anger as he immediately pointed his wand at the rat that was trembling in Snape's grasp. But I thought you killed him. Wasn't that why you were sent to Azkaban? Hermione asked. Sirius looked at her and turned away, pointing the wand at the rat once again. I'll answer your questions later. Throw him down, Severus. I want to kill him. I want to do the one thing I've been dreaming of doing all this time. I want to remind the rat that snitches get stitches. Snape remained calm under Sirius's barking and then looked at Peter too. Both their eyes were gleaming with anger and untold pain, each having lost one of their closest companions to the filthy rat. But a voice suddenly interrupted. Stop. It was Harry. Huh. Everyone turned to look at him. Can someone tell me why you were hell-bent on killing him? Sirius looked at Harry and controlled his anger. He closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths and spoke with caution. Because he killed your parents, Harry. But I thought you were the secret keeper. I might have as well killed him. Sirius sighed. Everyone's gaze was now focused on Sirius, who was looking off into the distance as if he was remembering something painful, and after a little bit, wiped away a tear that escaped his eye. I wasn't the secret keeper that night, Harry. I went against Dumbledore's words and made James change it to Peter. Thought no one would predict it was him and they'd all come after me. Thought it was quite funny too, since no one knew he was a Sequence 5 gatekeeper other than us. So it would help him digest his potion too. Sirius looked down as more tears escaped his eyes, then he shook his head and laughed. It was out of self-pity and contained much pain. Too bad, it turned out he really was a rat. A snitch that sold the location of your parents' house to that freaky bastard. Took him right to it. Sirius wiped away his tears and pointed his wand at Peter Pettigrew once again, his eyes more resolved than ever and his anger burning more fiercely than it ever had. And now I want to kill him. Everyone in the room looked at the rat that was squealing in Snape's hands with at least a little hatred. Did Professor Snape do something to stop him from being able to transform? Loki wondered, bored of Sirius's retelling of the story since he had already figured it out long ago. Can it also stop people from revealing or turning into their mythical creature forms? Wouldn't it also help in preventing loss of control in that case? I should get him to teach me about it. No. Harry spoke up again. Don't kill him, he said, placing his hand on Sirius's wand hand and pushing to lower it. Harry, it's him. He killed your parents. He was the disgusting rat that caused their deaths. I've spent all my time in Azkaban wondering how I would get him. There can't be a better way for him to die. Harry's eyes trembled, but he closed them for a few seconds and with a soft sigh spoke up. I don't think Mom or Dad would have wanted you to become murderers. Even you, Professor Snape, Harry said, causing Snape's lips to tremble. Both Snape and Sirius remained silent as they eyed each other, and in a moment of understanding Snape let Peter Pettigrew go. But before he could escape by rushing down the cracks that had formed all over the room, a thick beam of light rushed out of Sirius's wand and struck the rat straight in its chest, freezing it in the air as it was forced to transform. Everyone watched in disgust as the rat slowly morphed into the man Peter Pettigrew was. It felt morbid and unsettling, but no one took their eyes off it. The man landed on the wooden floor with a thud and began to look at everyone with trembling fingers. Sirius. Peter Pettigrew spoke. Lupin. Don't you remember how close we were? I've been waiting to meet you again. Get away from me, you filthy rat, Sirius said, waving his wand, almost whipping out the killing spell from it. Harry, please, let me go. I promise I will be useful to you again. Just imagine, you'll have someone close to him who will keep you informed. Harry's face scrunched up and he nearly kicked Peter in the stomach, but Lupin held him back just in time. Severus, I'm sure you know just how terrible he is. You know I didn't have a choice. You know it better than anyone else. Snape's lips quivered as his eyes turned bloodshot. He pointed his wand right at Peter and before anyone could do anything swiped his wand. An orange fiery whip erupted from his wand and wound around Peter's legs. Then, like a tentacle, the whip thrashed Peter around the room, until more floorboards came loose and dents formed in the walls. No one made a sound since it felt justified and let Snape thrash Peter for the next few minutes until he stopped making any sounds. With another flick of his wand, the whip retracted back into his wand and Peter Pettigrew rolled onto the floor in the center of the room, in between everyone. Lupin stepped up and without even checking if Peter was alright since he was a Sequence 5 Beyondner, flicked his wand to conjure ropes that wound all around him and bound him in an impossible-to-move posture. Everyone looked at each other awkwardly and Ron spoke up, "What now?" "We take him to the castle and turn him over to the Dementors." Snape looked at Ron with a sharp gaze and for the first time, "Do you sell your brains before coming to the potions class?" praised Ron in his own twisted way. Ron was stun-locked, he didn't know what to do, causing everyone else to snicker and stifle their laughter lest Snape's mood turn sour once again. With a wave of Sirius's wand, Peter floated into the air, still silent, while Sirius spoke with a slight tremor, "Am I going to be free?" The words sent a tremor through Harry's heart. Can I stay with you if? I mean, I heard you were my godfather. I mean only if you have a place, because the Dursleys aren't. I mean not to come off as a brat or something. I just. Pat. You don't have to be so nervous around him, Harry. Lupin said with a warm smile as Harry looked at Sirius, who was now frozen stiff. Just as Harry was about to feel even more terrible as he assumed Sirius was going to reject him, "You'd like to stay with me?" Sirius exclaimed. Snape was frowning, looking at them, but almost everyone ignored him. "It's all right, Professor Snape, I'm sure I can live with you if you want me to," Loki said with a polite smile. Snape just looked at him and scowled before turning away. Loki just giggled and started to walk out of the room, following Sirius and Harry, who were already immersed in talking with each other, making plans about summer, while Peter Pettigrew floated behind him, unconscious. "By the way, Sirius, why did you use the Imperious charm on me to bring me here if you actually wanted Peter?" Harry asked, causing everyone to pause in their conversations and hear what Harry had to say. Loki panicked as soon as he heard Harry ask the question, since this part of his plan depended on Dumbledore and how he'd handled things. Even if he was able to lead him down a path earlier, he wasn't sure he'd be able to do so easily again. I thought he'd wipe that memory away from him. Does he intend of leaving it behind to find the cause too? Loki had made a few preparations regarding this part, but it was yet to be seen if Dumbledore took the bait he'd let out. Perhaps meeting Aemon did scare him a little, just enough to overlook the coincidences. The Imperious Curse. When did I use that? I just arrived here because I received a letter from a close friend of mine to arrive here. Sirius, don't you dare betray our secrecy pact. Harry froze. He could distinctly remember being controlled into walking towards the Whomping Willow, his body walking as if it was out of his control until he reached the Shrieking Shack. You did not? Snape questioned from the back, causing Sirius to turn around to look at him. No, I was called by a student. He figured out midway through the semester that I was innocent and helped me stay away from the authorities and guided me here using a letter. Why don't you just tell away my name then? Well, at least I used my alter persona, so I should be safe. But Hermione turned around and looked at Loki, as did Snape. I swear I just said it as I saw in my vision. I saw Harry walking while he was unable to control his body and Sirius was waiting for him in the Shrieking Shack. Loki said, raising his hands up. Everyone froze in their positions as Snape turned back towards Sirius and asked him a question. Which student was this? That was helping you without informing the teachers. You want me to turn into a rat? Sirius said with folded arms and in an arrogant tone, causing Snape to scowl. Way to go, Sirius, Loki exclaimed inside his mind. Sigh, it's important, Sirius. Maybe that student has some particularly nasty plans for us. Lupin said, trying to be the voice of reason in the matter. Damn werewolf. Bark up some other tree, why don't you? Leave me alone. Well, if you put it that way, his name's Gehrman Sparrow, I remember how he looks. Safe. Gehrman Sparrow. There's no student like that at Hogwarts if I remember correctly. Perhaps he gave you the wrong name. Lupin said and Snape nodded. In that case, I remember how he smells, since I was in my dog form when I met him. Damn, I did not think about that. Dog form? Harry asked. Yes, I can turn into a large dog. It was my animagus transformation. Each one of us had one. You mean my dad too? Yes, even your dad, he was a stag. Lupin interrupted with a reminiscent smile. While Loki felt a little afraid of suddenly being recognized by Sirius, he was still glad that the topic of the conversation had changed. Surely there are few potions out there to change your body's natural odor if there's one to change your looks, right? Their way back to the castle was eventless. Harry and Sirius spoke to each other about their plans for the summer while Loki ruminated on their words in the background. How am I going to explain Sirius that I live in the Black Manor? How am I going to make Creature shut up about me in the first place? And Walburga, what about her? Do I tell Sirius that she's sleeping and needs to be rescued? Does he even know the prophecy that Grandma was talking about? Do I get a new home? Sigh, why is it so hard to hide my identity? While people kept misunderstanding Klein's identity all the time. Is this the power of plot armor? Walking into the Gryffindor Tower to enter the castle, everyone walked past a certain broom closet when all of a sudden *SSCCRECHHHHHH. Everyone ducked and covered their ears, even Loki. But what no one saw was how an illusion took Hermione's place while she was dragged away into the broom closet. Snape waved his wand in anger and silenced the sound temporarily by placing a sound barrier around them. What was that? Ron asked, shaking his finger inside his ear to prevent the ringing pain raging in it from getting any worse. You sure it was not your brother's Weasley? Snape commented, but his eyes remained on Peter Pettigrew, checking if he was the reason for the sound and wanted to escape. Loki stepped out of the silencing spell's range, not before shouting, I'll check it out. Must be another one of Zonko's pranks. And Hermione quickly followed behind him saying, "I'll follow him just in case something might happen." The rest remained inside the group, watching Peter Pettigrew. Moments later, Loki came back out of the corridor, Hermione walking back with him, and showed everyone a plate that had runes engraved onto it. Some prank item the twins were testing probably. Loki said as he stepped inside the silencing spell barrier again. "I stopped it by scratching out a small piece of the circuits, maybe you can inspect it." Lupin peered over the plate and looked at it along with Snape, but seeing there was nothing too important about it and that Peter Pettigrew hadn't even attempted to escape, they stepped back thinking that it was probably something unrelated. "Let's take Peter to Headmaster Dumbledore first," Lupin said, and everyone agreed, walking slowly toward the headmaster's office, this time more prepared for any sudden assault. Once at the Griffin stairwell gargoyle, everyone stopped. "Cockroach clusters," Snape spoke, causing the gargoyle to spring into life as it acknowledged their presence and spun around, revealing a spiraling staircase on which everyone stood. Arriving at the door on the top, Sirius was about to knock, when an aged voice spoke from inside. "You may come in." Loki gulped as he thought, first time meeting him, let's see how this goes. Stepping into the large office one by one, everyone gathered in front of the semicircular table that was placed beneath a staircase that took one behind a large wall at the end of the room. The entire circular office was filled with a variety of magical trinkets and knick-knacks that interested Loki greatly, but currently, all his attention was on the white-bearded man who sat on his long, royal, comfortable-looking chair. His entire attention was on Albus Dumbledore. "Is there a reason I shouldn't be surprised seeing one of the most wanted criminals inside my office?" Dumbledore asked. "Could I offer you some lemon drops?" he said, picking up a bowl of pale hard candy. "No, have had too many of those in the last year," Sirius said, casually shaking his head. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows and looked at the figure that had been revealed behind everyone, Peter Pettigrew. Everyone remained silent as Dumbledore examined Peter Pettigrew from his seat. But he slowly stood up and moved closer, making his way through the large group that had invaded his office as he bent low to look at the unconscious bound man. Everyone waited with bated breaths. Dumbledore slowly stood up. He's alive." Everyone felt the footing under their legs slip for a second after hearing Dumbledore's comment, but they still didn't say anything. Except Loki. Loki was admiring Dumbledore's acting skills. He was shocked by how well he acted, his confusion even though he knew that he knew everything there was to know about the situation. Dumbledore's eyes rested on Snape as if expecting something from him, but Harry interrupted. "Headmaster. It wasn't serious. He didn't reveal the location of my parents. It was Peter Pettigrew that did it." Dumbledore looked at Harry and then back at the bald man who was unconscious. "I see." And then Hermione spoke, trying to bring more clarity to the situation. "Harry had been missing for some time after he left the Great Hall, with no one seeing where he went, and so I got worried. I went to Loki to see if he could divine Harry's location, and then we learnt that he was going to the Shrieking Shack. So I went there along with Ron and Professor Lupin." Dumbledore nodded. "When Hermione rushed out of the room, I got a little worried if she was going to be alright, so I asked Professor Snape for help and went to the Shrieking Shack with him," Loki explained. Finally, Dumbledore's gaze rested on Snape once again. "We verified the claims Black made and decided it was best to bring that matter to you." "I see, I remember giving Peter's mother the news about a decade ago. Broken-hearted she was. She sobbed quite a bit that year if I remember right. At least she's gone thinking her son was a hero." There was a soft silence to Dumbledore's words that made them carry some weight and reality to it all. "We shall discuss further about this matter later. Harry, if you would go to Madame Pomfrey, I'm sure she would like to see if you are well. Your friends may escort you there," Dumbledore said with a soft smile, nodding his head at Hermione and Ron. "Sirius, Snape and Lupin, please stay here." Seeing Dumbledore had not stopped him, Loki breathed a mental sigh of relief and started walking back. "Ah, you too, Mr. Loki. I would need you for a second." "Shit, I spoke too soon." Hermione gave Loki one last glance and walked back with Ron and Harry. At least, he doesn't know about me using the T. No. I won't jinx it this time. Turning around, Loki looked at Dumbledore with a smile. Yes, Headmaster. What do you need from me? Nothing you wouldn't be able to provide. I have a pensieve in the office that we could use to scrutinize memories. Dumbledore said with a smile as he waved his wand and caused a section of the wall to flip on itself. It revealed a thin bowl with a shimmering milky white liquid as plain as a mirror inside it, and Loki's blood froze. My memory? Loki asked, doing his very best not to show anything wrong with him. He used every last bit Walburga had taught him about manners, his confidence in his abilities and his understanding as a swindler to manipulate his pitch and tone while he spoke, maintaining his body relaxed and inviting. Yes, we would have liked to be able to analyze the memory of your divination, Dumbledore said with a smile while the gears in Loki's head spun like a pinwheel in the wind. But unfortunately you are not skilled enough to be able to separate your memories, and it would be impossible for us to do it for you. Dumbledore continued, causing Loki to relax a little. So I would have to ask you to remember everything about the divination that you can remember, every small detail, everything possible. Could you tell me about the vision you had? It will help us immensely. Especially if there were any visits from the hidden sage. Loki sighed mentally and a smile sprouted on his face. Of course. Time to swindle, Adam, once again. A brief thought passed Loki's mind, but it was too brief for anyone else to capture. If I want to swindle them, I have to begin by swindling myself first. Especially since I am probably an open book to him. Loki looked at everyone in the room, Lupin, Severus and finally Dumbledore. Believe it or not, I didn't hear or see anything related to the hidden sage this time, at least not that I know of. Loki began. When I performed the divination earlier, the first thing I saw was a deep darkness. I didn't understand what this darkness was, since the more I looked at it, the deeper it seemed to suck me into the abyss. There were trees around me, ones that I could see because of the darkness, but ones that I could hear because of the rustling of leaves. Was it Tom's location that he saw? Did he divine about the shard that Tom exchanged with Harry on that night? But to be able to divine about even a hint of the prophecy that ties the two together, a prophecy I created. A lie. But his body of heart and mind is clearly recounting the same events he speaks of. The hidden sage helped him break the anti-divination measures. Or perhaps directly gave him the information in some way. Why? What no one realized was that Loki had never mentioned whose location he had divined. He was currently recounting the location of Voldemort that he had tried to divine just to confuse everyone. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed softly, but Loki didn't let it affect his practiced speech. And then he continued speaking about what he'd already know about Harry through divination in the Saphira Castle. Loki was using facts from the divination in the Saphira Castle to sell his importance. To give off the impression that his divination was somehow special. Somehow empowered by the hidden sage because of some special unknown reason. If I keep them chasing after lies, they'll never think of looking at the truth. Before I could investigate any more about the scene, I was kicked away from it and began to see something different. I saw Harry Potter opening an owl mail and picking up a coin to pocket before I saw him suddenly standing stiffly as he stared in the direction of the Whomping Willow in the Hogwarts grounds before walking up to it in a daze as I saw the inside of the Shrieking Shack with Sirius Black in it. Although that was all I saw, I was left with a deep sense of danger and worry when I finished the divination. As if I'd been the one that was actually turned into a puppet and not just Harry. Loki ended by focusing on his memories of being corrupted by the bone knife that scratched him earlier this year. Coming in contact with her will would likely do that. It was perhaps coming into effect to work to corrupt the boy as soon as he saw it in his divination. But the hidden sage must have helped him break it. Again, why? What's so special about the boy? Apart from the deep sense of misfortune that is related to altering his fate. There was a soft pause before Dumbledore nodded and asked a simple question that answers a few of my questions. I apologize for taking you down a harsh memory lane. Not at all, Headmaster, it would be my pleasure to be of any help. Dumbledore nodded before looking at Loki and asking him with a smile, would you perhaps happen to know anything about Gairman Sparrow? If someone as powerful as him was acting in the school this year, the hidden sage is likely to have shared information about him with what is possibly his blessed. But Loki almost froze when he heard that name from Dumbledore, but a timely interruption from Lupin saved him from the awkward pause that was about to develop. Yet it didn't escape Dumbledore's trained eyes. Shock dominated by surprise and distrust. Did the hidden sage tell him not to trust anyone else with this information? So this was what he wanted to really ask me about, Loki thought, loudly enough for Dumbledore to read it. I guess he heard about it from Professor Snape or McGonagall, and he's probably come across the true god himself. He wants to learn anything he can about him. Gairman Sparrow. That was the same name Sirius gave us when he said that a student in the castle helped him. Lupin interrupted. Dumbledore then slowly turned to look at Loki once again. If I'm not wrong, you were looking for information about him at the beginning of the year in your divination office. Dumbledore asked again. Loki matched eyes with Dumbledore and nodded. He let some of his fear of being questioned by a spectator show since he wanted to sell his next lines fully. The reason I was looking for Gairman Sparrow at the start of the year was because after I learned about something, I became afraid. During this statement, Loki simply littered his body of heart and mind with thoughts about the hidden sage to make Dumbledore conclude that it was the source of Loki's information. And so Loki continued. From what I understand, Gairman Sparrow is an alias of a student at Hogwarts who is connected to a true god's family directly. I don't know much else about this family or even the student behind the alias itself, since any divination about them is easily deflected. This was the source of my fear and the reason I wanted to seek information about Gairman Sparrow. Since I suspected that a true god's family should best be avoided completely unless one wanted to get entangled with them. I wanted to know more about them to prepare to avoid them. Loki added. But things don't always go as planned. The more I learnt about the true god, the more afraid I became of him. I'm sure Professor Lupin can attest to it, since that is what the boggart turned into when it confronted me. Dumbledore turned to Lupin and he nodded. I can produce the memory if you want me to, Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore nodded and turned back to look at Loki, his eyes swimming across Loki's thoughts on his body of heart and mind, thoughts of fear of being parasitized and thoughts of suddenly finding he wasn't who he thought he was all along. His abilities relate to parasitism. Is that how he took over his descent vessel? Snape frowned, since Loki had never informed either him or McGonagall about this, and so he asked Loki the most logical question in that moment, something that Loki was betting on from the beginning. What was the name of this god? Loki was betting on it, since everything that he had said till now didn't point to any dangerous outer deities, and given how knowing about the god hadn't killed him or turned him into some sort of corrupted monstrosity, Loki felt that Snape would think it was safe to know about. Dumbledore froze when Snape asked this question. He almost wanted to flick his wand and wipe away everyone's memories of the question ever being asked. Loki looked at Snape, gulped nervously, and then looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore was quick to capitalize on Loki's fear to stop anything from happening without making it seem like he was afraid himself. You don't have to speak if you're afraid. But do remember, Hogwarts is always a safe place for those that reside in it, since they will all always be protected irrespective of their status. Amen. Loki interrupted and closed his eyes in fear as he uttered the word. Loki was trembling. Most of his fear came from thinking about how he'd almost died when he'd contested for the body with the true creator. But what none of the people in the room could see was that Dumbledore's hands trembled slightly at the mention of Aemon. He almost had to placate himself to keep his emotions in control. Everyone in the room was slightly unnerved by Loki's reaction, and they all felt the hairs on the back of their necks lift for a few seconds, but when nothing happened, they all relaxed a little. You can stop here, Mr. Loki. I can see it makes you uncomfortable. You don't need to continue. Dumbledore asked, his eyes gleaming as he studied Loki's swirling thoughts on his body of heart and mind that was completely unprotected. With a light self-pitying smile, Loki spoke after he nodded in acknowledgement. Thank you, Professor. But I think everyone should know about it so that they can better protect themselves. Is there anything else you've heard about the Aemon family from the hidden sage? Snape asked again, irrespective of Dumbledore's stance on the matter. Loki gulped, smiled wryly while looking at everyone in the office as if he were evaluating something, and then spoke softly in the silence that amplified his voice 1,000 times. Well, I don't know if this is true or false, but I did learn that he was closely related to the founders of Hogwarts. Loki, with his enhanced vision, clearly saw Dumbledore's pupils dilate, as if he'd just been given a shocking piece of information that defined his life. But Dumbledore was quick to cover it all up with a grandfatherly smile as he looked at Loki and nodded before speaking. That will be all, Mr. Loki. Thank you for staying back and answering this troubled old man's silly questions. Let me know if you ever have something that you need help with from me. You may leave now. Loki looked at Dumbledore and smiled happily. The pleasure was all mine, Professor. Thank you for making Hogwarts such a pleasant school. It feels just like home. Loki bowed and was going on his way out before he noticed a hat on a stool inside a glass case wink at him as he left. Once again, Loki entered the familiar golden doors in the middle of the night and strolled around the room of convenience until he came across the book that he had read earlier. Horrors of the Dark. A book bound in green leather with a hardcover on which the title was engraved in golden lettering. Loki pulled the book out to himself and sat down on the chair with his legs on the table to read relaxedly. Tink. Ah. Nice. Loki held the book in one hand after opening it to the right page and the teacup with the other while slowly taking sips from it. Leaving it to hang in the air to give his hands some rest, Loki began reading through the book from where he had stopped earlier. Looking at the note from the author section that had creeped him out, Loki turned the pages to see if that was the end of the note, and after confirming it was, he turned to the next page. Chapter 1. Why am I making wands? With the advent of magic that Rowena will unleash upon the world, humans will try to manipulate their spirituality to perform the various magics that true gods will be able to bestow to the world. What? Loki's eyes froze again as he read the paragraph once again. What does it mean by magics that true gods will bestow on the world? Loki stared hard at the sentence, trying to think up theories to understand the meaning of the sentence, but he stopped thinking after a while since he hoped the book would answer the question for him. So he read further. Given how the barrier keeping them out will collapse in another few centuries, I hope to empower humans with the ability to defend themselves as Mr. Error did for us. And making wands that use materials from magical species of animals is a crucial step in that direction, since if I am able to pull out the quality of instinctive control over spirituality that magical animals have and give it to the humans, they should become a formidable force, since lack of control will no longer be an issue and they won't have to contend with the madness of becoming a Beander. A force that not even their followers can hold back. Sigh. Loki placed the book on the table, took a sip of tea and rubbed his eyes. Barrier keeping them out will collapse in another few centuries. Does this mean that there's no barrier keeping the outer gods out of the planet? But everything seems too ordinary for such a calamitic event to have happened. Loki pondered over the issue for a while until a thought surfaced. Didn't Adam, while speaking with her in the tunnel, say something along the lines of her being safe only because she remains on no side? Was he talking about keeping the outer gods' influence out of the planet? Is he protecting the planet by making something similar to a barrier? No, that seems too far-fetched. When I saw him, both as a spirit under the Whomping Willow and as a student in his office, he definitely had a divine aura around him, but godly. No, I'm pretty sure he is just a king of angels or a normal angel. Loki's potion suddenly digested by 10%, bringing him up to 92%. Moving on. So someone else is keeping the planet protected from their influence. But who? And most importantly, how? Loki's fingers drummed the table as he became lost in thought, wondering about any other famous figures in the history of the magical world that might fit the role of a divine being that was protecting the planet. It could be Damn, that was close. Loki performed the celestial worthy of heaven and earth ritual and slipped into the Saphira castle where he continued contemplating the mysterious information he had just uncovered. So it could be Merlin who's a deity and is protecting the entire planet. What pathway could even achieve such a result? If all the founders are sealed in the room of convenience, and Salazar was only freed recently, which gods is he partnering with to stop the outer gods? Loki felt like he was hanging by a cliff with the question, like he was striking the crux of the matter and he just had to listen to it in the right way to figure everything out. Which gods could he be partnering with? Zeus could be the god of lightning. But that's still just one god from the Greek pantheon. Maybe there are more gods like the Norse ones and such that I don't know about yet. But where are their temples? Why aren't there any temples for them to maintain their sanity? Jesus has a church. But why don't any of the other gods have one? Loki frowned, deep in thought as a stray thought came to him. Perhaps the gods are using magic to maintain the barrier. And they're also maintaining their sanity somehow with its help. Maybe it makes it safer and is the more preferred option. Given how occlumency is possible, maybe there are better ways to maintain sanity using it somehow. But there are still several mad gods, so it is likely that magic isn't the solution if there are restrictions on who's using it. Or, is it some great old one? Maybe Merlin along with other true gods are secretly great old ones and have accommodated their Sephiroth. Which is why they're able to fight off the outer gods. But which pathway could they be from if they've accommodated the corresponding Sephiroth? Not the Saphira castle since I have that. Probably not River of Eternal Darkness since Salazar is likely the true god of the darkness pathway. Not the Brood Hive since that's hers, and not the Tenebrous World and the Nation of Disorder since that belongs to outer deities too. That leaves the Chaos Sea, City of Calamity, Knowledge More and the Key of Light. But those many great old ones, the world would have probably been much different if that was the case. It is not likely to be true. Loki struggled to think up any more without shooting off into random conspiracy theories without facts. Exiting the Saphira castle, Loki went back to reading the book that Salazar had written. Chapter 2. Aim. I aim to make a wand like Mr. Error's. It was perfectly what a wand should be, a weapon capable of perfectly killing the enemies of its owners. I have chosen to use the bone of a Dementor because that is what Mr. Error's wand was made out of, and I can't help but want to imitate it. Loki slumped back into his chair. His eyes trembled as he looked at the book in front of him and then back at his wand. Didn't Ollivanders sell it? But Loki knew he felt otherwise. His brain had already considered a solution. Ollivanders were perhaps the first people to learn the process of wand making under Salazar. Right then, his potion digested by another 5%, bringing him to a total of 97%. Today is not a good day for my heart. Sitting under a tree in the center island on the Black Lake, Loki watched the curious little bowtruckle steal honey from the jar in his hand as he kept his eyes nearly closed while watching the shy tree people. Playing with the bowtruckles had become something of a pastime over the last month for Loki. A sort of ritual that would allow him to unwind after reading Salazar Slytherin's book about making wands. The bowtruckles got honey and Loki got funny hairstyles from them since they loved tying his hair up as a pastime. In fact, the routine had turned into a bit of a game between Loki and bowtruckles. He'd keep his eyes closed and as long as he didn't notice any of them messing with his hair, Loki wouldn't open his eyes. Anyone who was noticed was caught and hung upside down with their legs attached to the tree using honey which they consumed slowly while watching their other friends play the game. Crunch. The sudden crack of a tree branch scared away a lot of the bowtruckles and caused a frown to appear on Loki's face. I'm sorry. I hadn't seen you here. I was searching for waxperts. A bright chirpy voice that seemed lazy floated into Loki's ears as he opened his eyes and looked up. A face with absurdly designed paper spectacles appeared in his vision. The glasses looked like the face of a fly but had glitter all over them while the glasses in them had psychedelic patterns that appeared blue on one side and pink on the other. The body of the spectacles themselves had several psychedelic circles drawn on it that shimmered in the light, making it feel even more confusing and disorientating. But the frown on Loki's face was only momentary as the words the girl had spoken entered Loki's mind. Waxperts. Those invisible things that were in my first potion ingredient. Waxperts? Loki asked with surprise. I was looking for them. Your head seems to be filled with them. All the trails in the castle lead me to you. The girl said calmly, her tone felt like it was a perpetual expression of finality. There are waxperts inside my head. Why? How? Loki asked, confused and a little shocked. They just increased. Loki couldn't keep track and became a little dumbfounded. I feel fine though. Are you feeling down? The girl asked as if she were speaking to a puppy on the side of the road. I'm a little confused. Loki admitted, still wondering where this was leading. Waxperts are known to inhabit a confused mind. They thrive among those that think too much, since we sabotage ourselves sometimes. Do Dementors have a lot of waxperts in their little heads then? No. Why would they? They are always happy. They eat happiness. I fed a little bit of mine to a friend I made this year. Unfortunately, he had to leave when the grim dog was found. You mean serious? Wait a second, how did you know? I am a biologist. A biola? Loki was about to ask what she meant by that, but his words froze mid-sentence. She's a sequence 6 biologist from the mother pathway. I can't stay here, lest she do something to me that involves mushrooms, fishes, cows and an ungodly amount of wine. I like plants. And animals. I know an animal when I see one. Loki looked at the girl who had just barged her way into his sanctuary and had started spitting out random facts, each one hitting harder than the other with suspicion. What do you want? Waxperts. All the trails lead to you. Luna's messenger is with you. The girl said again. Loki could swear he could hear a little bit of annoyance in her tone, but even his supreme senses told him he was imagining things, so he let it go. Loki stared at the girl dumbfounded and then decided to ignore her while he stood up and used a spoon to leave behind globules of honey at all the entrances of the Bowtruckles' houses. Do you know why you are confused? The girl asked, inserting herself into Loki's pathway as he tried to avoid getting any honey on her hair by accident. Of course, I know why I am confused, Loki thought while trying to dodge the girl and get rid of her. Wrong. You are confused because you don't know the source of your confusion. Loki froze in his steps, but then he started marching again after shielding his mind with the concealment rune as he had a frown on his face. Try reading my mind now, you fool. I'm not reading your mind. The waxperts told me you were lying. Loki froze when he heard the word waxperts again and properly looked at the girl who was following him. She had straggly waist-length dirty blonde hair and was walking barefoot in the forest. Where are your shoes? Oh, I'm sure they'll find their way back to me. They must have just gone out on a jog. Look, could you just tell me why you're here? Waxperts. I'm here for the waxperts. And you're going to keep following me as long as they're in my head. Yes, I understand. Do you know how I can get rid of the waxperts then? How can you see them in the first place? Those paper glasses special. They aren't glasses. They're called spectrospecs. They allow one to look into the spirit world. Waxperts come from the spirit world. Loki asked, surprised. Yes, they can become messengers if you were thinking about that. They're tiny but they can carry thoughts of any length in them. As you can see, they like to gossip. I see. And how do I get rid of them? You need to know the source of your confusion. Loki frowned, unsure of sharing his rather secret troubles with someone who he'd just met randomly. You can tell me about it. I won't tell anyone. Most wouldn't believe me anyway. They call me Loony Lovegood. Loony Lovegood? Loki asked with raised eyebrows. The girl nodded. You're Loony Lovegood. Even Myrtle calls you that. Loki suddenly said with surprise while Luna just stared at him, causing the conversation to turn awkward. I didn't mean it that way. I don't trust the rumors much. So you can rest assured. So do you know what you are confused about? Luna would like to have her messenger back. Luna asked again, a little more monotone than before. Loki stared at Luna for a while, his mind still uncertain about sharing his troubles with her, but then he decided to talk, not out of annoyance at being followed. he could just lose her and hide using his illusions if that were the case. But out of his memory about the mother pathway, the pathway Luna was a meander of. A meander of such a pathway was quite important to Loki, especially because if he had such a person by his side earlier this year he wouldn't have had to take such ridiculous risks to get himself rid of corruption. A Sequence 8 doctor could very easily cure a person's soul from corruption and other illnesses. And Luna wasn't even a Sequence 8 but a Sequence 6 biologist. It was highly likely that in the future when she advanced to the corresponding Sequence 4 her abilities would have strengthened enough to cure him of the direct corruption from a god. It's better to have such people on my side. Who knows, perhaps our meeting today is a coincidence arranged by fate. But, if I advance further I'm likely going to be able to cure myself of corruption anyway. Are you going to stay with those glasses on your face the entire time? It makes you look kind of funky, to be honest. Quote. Luna looked at Loki unmovingly as if she didn't care about his most recent comment. Fine, I'll talk. You don't need to be so stiff. Quote. Or sigh I guess that's just how you are. I'm worried about a play I've been writing. There's a character in the play and he doesn't know what to do about the information he was given. He's worried that if he makes one wrong move, a few dangerous people will recognize who he is. I see, Luna said with a soft pause and then she looked back at Loki and spoke with determination. Isn't that simple to solve? If you can't do something by yourself then you should ask someone else to do it for you. Loki was about to argue instinctively, asking how he was going to reveal his identity to someone else for them to do such a thing. But then his brain spat back an idea that caused him to think deeply about it. That, I can do, that, can't I? That surprisingly makes sense. It looks like you've figured it out. Luna said with a soft smile. Oh, the waxperts are leaving my head. Loki asked, Luna's smile taking his attention. Yes, they are. Would you like to see them before they're gone? Luna asked. Oh, yes, sure, why not? At least I can see the buggers that fed on my confusion. Luna pulled out another pair of specter specs from the pocket in her robes and handed them to Loki who quickly put them on. Oh, Loki exclaimed when he spotted the tiny wispy alterations that happened around him. There were hundreds if not thousands of small glittering deformations in the space around Loki as they slowly retreated away from his head and flew off into the sky. Each individual alteration in space felt like glitter had suddenly grown transparent wings and was able to fly. They're pretty, Loki praised. They are. You know what? What? Just like you helped me out with a problem, I have a solution to yours, Loki said as he pulled out his wand. Luna just stared at Loki without any expression as he spoke in exaggeration. Oh come on. Be more excited. Show an expression or something at least. Quote. Luna kept giving Loki a deadpan stare while not speaking anything. From an outer perspective, it looked like Loki was bullying the innocent Luna with his wand out, but fortunately, there was no one around to see it. Loki shook his head and without worrying about much else, pointed his wand at the stones beside Luna's feet. The stones soon morphed and folded in on themselves until they finally expanded and formed a sneaker made of strawberry-patterned cloth with white laces and trimmings on them. Luna looked at the shoes and then back at Loki, repeating the action for a few seconds before she said, "Thanks." Luna has never gotten transfigured shoes before. You're welcome. I hope you find me in room 2-21 if you're ever free. It was fun talking to you. Now if you'd excuse me, I have something I need to do. Loki said and began to walk back to the castle, taking the boat he had tied to the shore and rowing across the Black Lake. Reaching back inside the castle, Loki entered the room of conveniences and walked up to the book that was on the table just like how he'd left it the last time he was there. Loki however ignored the book on the table, pulled out his own notebook and began to write down a variety of ideas inside it. Do I just follow Klein and make a tarot club replica in this world? It would be useful, but I don't need to make a club to gather mysticism knowledge. I need it to be more like an adventures guild so that I can assign its members several missions for them to complete. For that, although I could easily pretend to be a god, Like Klein did and assign the members missions, it wouldn't last long without me giving them proper rewards. I could give them money, but that probably wouldn't keep them interested for long. A better option would be if I give them a Beyonder item that is customized to them. I could pretend that the Beyonder items I'm giving them have something to do with the history of this world and that they were used or created by some important people, but if I get any of it wrong or if I'm caught lying, that would ruin my image as a mysterious god that has merged with the shadows of history. I could make a school for mysticism that is filled with advanced mystical knowledge that I gained from the books in this library, but I haven't read enough of it myself this year. Well, I could recreate them in the Saphira Castle as I read them one by one. That would also keep the expectations of my members in control while also improving my image as a benevolent god that bargains with his members. But there might be several errors in the books which would once again question my integrity. But I could explain those off as the writer of the book being biased in their view of the events. Do I just copy Klein then? But to get the participants of the Tarot Club to take part in any of my plans I would need time to earn their trust for them to act as I say, especially if any of them are stronger than me at this point in time. Loki looked at his book which was now filled with random ideas and closed it, leaving the problem to future him so that he could go back to focusing on Salazar's book which felt slightly more appetizing at this moment. I didn't know my wand could do that. The book had taught him a lot about his wand, or at least what he thought was his wand since he still couldn't pull off any of the abilities his wand had. Loki looked at the list of abilities that his wand was supposed to have and focused on the first and easiest one of them that he should have been able to pull off. Despondent call. Alright, let's try this one more time. If I can't do it this time then it means that Salazar did not make my wand. Following the instructions Salazar had written in the book, Loki poured his spirituality into the wand and held it in there. It felt like he was filling a water bottle and he could, instead of hearing it filling to completion, feel it tighten like a rubber band as he poured in his spirituality. Once the wand was primed and filled with his entire spirituality, Loki, just like how the book said, imagined the wand resonating and calling out to the owner of its bone. In front of Loki's eyes, the bone-white wand trembled and emitted a hollow purple glow, giving it an eerie feeling that chilled Loki's hand slightly. This had happened multiple times now and was exactly as the book had described it to be. Loki read the corresponding passages in the book once again while holding the wand primed and wondered if there were any mistakes in what he was doing. But he found none. Bloody hell. What's wrong with this? What am I missing? Is there a secret step that is not written in here? Perhaps feeling Loki's frustration, the teacup floated toward Loki. He spared it a glance and took a sip from it before going back to staring at the book and then his wand. The descriptions of the wand were exactly the same. The wand is 13 inches long, has a pointed tip, is made out of Dementor bone and has unicorn hair as a core. That was exactly how Ollivanders described his wand to be, and that was how Salazar Slytherin described the wand in his book. There were extra details in the book, like how the Dementor's bone was treated specially by bathing it in unicorn's blood and allowing it to soak the light of the moon and sun, but those details weren't something Loki could easily check without damaging the wand. Is this really not my wand? Sigh, maybe I'm just hallucinating. Loki drummed his wand on the table while continuing to think if there was something he was not paying attention to. And he did. He figured out exactly what he was missing out. Merlin's beard. How did I not think of that? Loki quickly checked the Marauder's map and rushed outside when he found that there was no one standing out and moved to a window. Standing by the window with his wand sticking out, Loki began to pour his spirituality into the wand, once again filling it to the brim. As Loki focused his mental ability on the wand calling out to the owner of its bone, the wand began to tremble in his hands as it slowly began to acquire a hollow purple glow. And this time, within moments the space around Loki twisted as a bony skeleton hand emerged out of it, slowly floating out along with a frail body covered in robes that spread around it an aura of suppression with it. Loki immediately recognized the intruder. It was a Dementor and not just anyone, it was the one that had violently attacked him while he was on the train and was about to suck his soul. Loki felt a little scared, but trusting Slytherin's book he spoke. You are not to attack me under any condition. The Dementor that had been floating toward him after it emerged out of the spirit world suddenly froze as if its strings were cut. Ha! It works. I now have a way to control a Dementor with my wand. A sinister idea suddenly popped up into Loki's mind and he acted on it. You were attacking me on the train, right? So from now on as punishment you'll be my personal butler, bring me food each time I call you out. Loki didn't know if the Dementor understood what he was talking about since it just stood there frozen, but Loki didn't mind. Instead, he gave it another order. Come closer, he said, and the Dementor floated close to Loki. Once within his range, Loki extended his hand with the Ring of Harvest on it and allowed it to pick out one soul from within the Dementor's stomach. The Dementor stood still while it all happened as the Ring of Harvest greedily devoured the single soul. Did you see that? Loki asked while the Dementor stood still. Bring me souls each time I call you. And if you do good, maybe I can even reward you with something. Loki said in a proud tone. You may leave, Loki said after getting into a staring contest with the Dementor, which slowly departed into the spirit world to return from where it had come. Ha! Now I have a solution to the problem of feeding you, Loki said looking at the Ring of Harvest that burped softly after having its most recent meal. Loki entered the room of conveniences once again and collapsed into the chair as he let out a content sigh. So Salazar Slytherin did create my wand, Loki concluded, and caused his potion to digest by 7%, bringing it up to 99%. And this room is able to block the outside world from interfering in it. His eyes then went to the crystals in the center of the room where the founders were trapped. Makes sense that the founders wouldn't want someone peeking into their resting place. But to still think I hadn't thought of this earlier, I guess I really was stressed about facing everything alone later in the future. Everything went silent for a while and Loki drank tea in peace while looking out the window, recollecting everything that had happened this year, from the matter about Sirius Black to the matter regarding the true creator's descent. It all felt like it had happened so long ago, but Loki could still feel the tremors running down his spine as he thought about those events. Although I was worried about the future, I'm slowly getting more and more worried about the past too. Loki looked at Salazar's book and then at all the other books in the library. Am I Mr. Error? Did I travel to the past and set all this into motion? Loki didn't need a voice to answer the question. His potion digestion increased by the remaining 1% and that was good enough as an answer for him. The completion of his potion digestion left Loki feeling refreshed, causing him to stretch and relax. I guess there's one last theft that I have to perform this year then. Can't end the year without stealing it. Too precious to give up because of some silly reason. That was a great performance, Loki. Professor Lupin encouraged while nodding at Loki after he exited the final trap chamber that was designed to test the students against boggarts. I hope you'll keep my fear hidden from everyone else, Professor, Loki said, returning a slightly embarrassed nod. Haha, don't worry, your secret's safe with me. Lupin nodded politely and Loki sighed in relief, leaving through the doors so that another student could enter the testing room. Thank you, Professor. I hope you have a great end of the year. Haha, goodbye. Walking out of the classroom, Loki spotted Snape talking to several Slytherin students who were waiting in line ready to enter the classroom to take the test. Loki didn't mean to, but he inadvertently eavesdropped on their conversation, especially since Draco was being particularly loud. No way. Wait till my father hears about this. Professor Lupin is a werewolf. Loki froze in his footsteps, as did Snape, who had just informed Draco. All the students looked at Draco and Snape with shock, wondering if they were speaking the truth. It looked like Snape was taking all his restraint not to snap outright and bash Draco's head into the wall. He took a deep breath, and then very slowly turned around without saying another word and walked away. Loki shook his head. Just as I was thinking we would be getting a half-decent professor next year as well. Can't have good Dada professors at Hogwarts, I guess. With a disappointed sigh, Loki began to walk to his destination. A broom closet. Sitting down in the closet, Loki began to think about his current most important problem. How am I going to break it to Sirius Black that I am his housemate? Creature told me that he's already been living in the house for quite a while now. He doesn't go to anyone else's rooms and is just there to sleep while he spends the rest of the day drunk and womanizing. Though. Can I just spring it upon him that his collaborator is also his roommate? But won't Harry be living in there too? I don't want to come into Adam's radar just yet if that's possible. I'm sure he'll be keeping a close eye on everything related to him, especially the house if Sirius is actually going to let him live there. Perhaps it's time I get a house of my own. But that'd be expensive even if I rent one. Loki kept pondering about meaningless things until he saw Hermione take her Dada exam on the Marauder's map. Once she was out of the classroom, Loki turned himself invisible and got out of the broom closet. If I am right, it is going to happen now. Loki saw Hermione speak to her two friends, Harry and Ron, who were waiting for her to finish the test. She seemed sad and disappointed. Did her Dada test not go well? Oh, maybe she couldn't scare away her boggart. Loki's deepest fear after having fallen prey to corruption from a deity had promptly turned into that instead of Aemon. And to conquer it he'd given himself super muscles which somehow trapped the corruption and squeezed it out of existence like a cartoon muscle flex. So Loki looked at her with some understanding of how hard that part of the test could be. She's just learned about people possessing superpowers in this world. She's probably imagined some eldritch horror doing something to her with its super. And you know what the boggart turned into? Hermione shouted as Ron and Harry got closer to where Loki was standing. What? Harry asked, worried that Hermione had gotten scared and needed to go to the hospital wing. Probably just turned into Professor McGonagall handing her a report card that was filled with T for troll or something, Ron said, shrugging his shoulders. Haha, although that'd be funny. No offense Hermione, no way that's true, Harry said, but Hermione wasn't following the two boys anymore. She was standing behind them, glaring at Ron. If you knew that was going to happen, why didn't you tell me about it? I could have been so much more prepared. Ag. Now Professor Lupin thinks I'm some failure. Loki became dumbfounded, as did Ron and Harry. Hermione on the other hand smashed her bag into Ron and started walking away. Should we follow her? Harry asked with confusion. You mad? Why would we follow her right now? She's probably only going to use us to take out her frustration. You know her. She'll probably say something like, Harry, your hair is too untidy. Fix it or I'll tell Professor McGonagall about it, Ron said with a frown. Loki almost broke his cover by laughing at the surprisingly close retort, but he stayed silent and quickly rushed behind Hermione to follow her. Hermione first went to the washroom, outside which Loki waited patiently until she came out and then started to follow her again. And his following around paid off when he saw her walking towards Professor McGonagall's office. Knock *, knock. Come in. An old but stern voice sounded from inside the room and Hermione pushed open the door for her to enter, but Loki quickly followed her inside. The inside of Professor McGonagall's office was cozy but austere. One could easily tell the room belonged to a professor and not anyone else. Professor McGonagall was sitting behind her table, but there was also someone else in the room, a man with a stern face and a thin mustache. He immediately stood up as Hermione arrived and looked at her with a stern expression. Good afternoon, Miss Granger. I suppose you've done well in your tests. Hermione's eyes twitched a little seeing McGonagall ask her this when just a few minutes ago she was handing her a report filled with T for troll. But she managed to keep her composure and nod. Yes, Professor, I did well. Let us get to the matter, Professor. I don't have all day. The man said, and both McGonagall and Hermione shot him a sharp glare. Yet the man didn't back down. Loki, however, was eager for everyone to get to the matter since it meant he could execute what he'd come here for. Ahem, let's do it then. Miss Granger, I suppose you will not be needing the time turner anymore. No, Professor, I will be dropping Muggle studies along with divination. I don't think I will be needing it anymore. Good. I understand. And you have the time turner on you, I presume? Yes, Professor. Hermione said, pulling out the golden chain around her neck, attached to which was a tiny hourglass inside a gyroscope-like mechanism. Loki's eyes twinkled as he stared at the contraption that he had only used once and greedily wanted to use many times more. But it seemed like this would not be for him when the man stretched his hand out. "Please hand it over." Hermione did as she was told and gave the man the time turner. "You haven't damaged it, I suppose?" the man asked with a frown as he inspected the time turner. "No. And you haven't used it for doing any circusy tricks with time? Like allowing your friends to use it to see their dead parents or something?" "No. I see. Good then. I will be off." The man slipped the time turner into a velvety box and started to walk out of the room without any fancy questions or salutations. Hermione and McGonagall stared at the man as he walked out of the room, but Loki quickly rushed behind him, following him out. Finally. God, I was wondering what was taking him so long. With the man out of Professor McGonagall's office, Loki executed his well-thought-out plan. Looking at the time on his pocket watch, Loki counted down until he reached 3:29. A fluttering piece of paper came down from the dark tall Gothic roof and landed on the man's hand, causing him to pause. He looked around and not finding anyone else, picked up the paper that had landed on his hand. "This is you from the future. A boy will walk into the corridor from the right." The man read the short letter and then looked to his right where there was no one standing. Just as he was about to raise his guard up and contact his colleagues for immediate help as per protocol in this situation, a boy stepped into the corridor. He looked around confusedly while searching for something in the corridor. A slight chill ran up the man's spine. He immediately looked around everywhere but didn't find anyone else there with him. His grip on the box holding the time turner tightened. Then he felt the paper in his hand burn. He looked at it immediately and read the new words that had formed on it. "The boy is there to steal the time turner. Turn around and calmly pretend you didn't notice him. Once he bumps into you, drop the box. We will teach the boy a lesson on what happens to those that mess with the unspeakables." What the note said did not make much sense, but having proved its validity, the man did as he was told and turned around and began walking patiently until the boy started moving in his direction. Once the boy bumped into him, the man dropped the box as he was told to by the short letter. He turned around to immediately pick it up, but he felt the letter in his hand burn again, so he shifted his attention to it instead of the boy. Let the boy hand you the box, and once he gives it back to you, take the time turner back from his left pocket. The man looked at the boy and realized he hadn't even seen him slip the time turner into his pocket. He's good. I would have been fooled had it not been for this note. But how did he open the box? Well, whatever, huh? I'm so smart to use the time turner to help myself. I should be given a raise. The man waited and the boy calmly handed the box back over. I'm sorry for bumping into you. I was just looking for Professor McGonagall's office. The man opened the box and found nothing inside it. No worries, the man said calmly before pulling out his wand and sticking it to the boy's throat. Listen here, you little shite. Give me back the time turner now. And if you don't tell me who ordered you to do this, I will break every bone in your body and force you to live. The man was about to continue cursing at the boy and torture him when suddenly he saw him smile. Were you now? How cute. Well, goodbye. And next time, don't take orders from a piece of paper. The boy said and vanished, just like that, causing the man to become rooted on his spot. The man quickly opened the box to check if it was empty or if the time turner had really been stolen, but he couldn't find the box he was just holding. Where did the box, huh? The man was surprised and quickly checked everywhere around himself, and to his surprise, the box was still lying at his feet. He quickly opened the box and looked at the time turner that was right there. No one had taken it out. He then looked at his hand trying to find the note that he was reading off of, but found nothing. Did I just hallucinate everything? The man quickly looked at the time turner again and verified that it was still inside the box. No. This has got to be the work of some Beander or someone using a mystical item. I have to report this. The man increased his walking speed and rushed towards the Hogwarts gates so he could immediately apparate away to the secure location of the Unspeakable's office. With a pop, the man arrived at the emergency location as he rushed towards his superior's office. Agent, you have to state your purpose before you can enter his office. the receptionist shouted from behind, but the man ignored her and rushed into the office. "Ma'am, USP code 007 reporting. I have urgent news to deliver." "Ma'am, I'm sorry." But the man just started to run and there was no. The receptionist who was trying to stop the man from entering entered the office, but the boss already inside just raised her hand and silenced her. "You may leave us alone," the woman said, and the receptionist fearfully nodded before leaving to go to her desk. "USP code 007, you said. Weren't you sent to retrieve the time turner from Hogwarts? What happened? Did he do something to interrupt you and keep the device?" "No, ma'am," USP 007 said with a salute, and after receiving a short nod from his senior he continued, "The image of a child interrupted me on my mission. He vanished shortly after, but I managed to keep the time turner with me." "A child?" the man asked, confused. "Yes, ma'am. The child was about 160 centimeters and appeared to use illusions. I couldn't confirm what Beander pathway he was from, but I am quite sure he was a Beander." The woman's eyes suddenly narrowed when she heard about it. You said you got back the time turner. Give it to me." "Yes, ma'am." The man saluted again and, loosening his iron grip on the case, transferred the item to his senior. "Let's see." The woman slowly opened the box and looked at it. Her pupils dilated quite a bit before shrinking down to a pinprick. "What happened, ma'am? You said that you kept the time turner protected." "Yes, ma'am." "Then why's this here and not the time turner?" The woman slowly turned the box on the table around and let the agent see exactly what she was seeing. Inside the velvet box was a small piece of paper with the words, "You got jebaited." There was a picture of a green frog wearing clown's makeup and hair while looking off into the distance with a smile. At the end of it all was a small verse, "The error got you." The agent felt a shiver run down his spine as he pointed his finger at the box and said, but I checked. It was right there. The time turner, it was right there. The box cannot be opened by anyone else other than an unspeakable agent. The woman said as politely as she could, but the agent's hands still trembled. But. The woman took a deep breath and exhaled a soft sigh like she was looking at something tiresome. USP 007, who had just delivered the news, felt a chill travel down his spine. A sense of authority suddenly befell him as he felt the shadows in the room exaggerate until all he could see were the glowing eyes of the woman in front of him. Unable to bear the weight, he collapsed onto the ground as he simply stared at her wordlessly. The woman didn't care much about it. She simply flicked her wand and caused a small ethereal bird to form out of her elegant wand. The bird gave her a short nod before leaving the room through the door. The woman then spoke a single word in ancient Latin. Imprison. The man suddenly found himself trapped in a small section of the room, surrounded by transparent walls that were nigh impenetrable. Outside the office, a man looked at the little bird that had flown into his room with a calm gaze as he snuffed out his cigar. The bird opened its mouth and instead of a tweet spoke in the voice of a woman with tremendous calm and patience, inform her that the time turner has gone missing in Hogwarts. Why waste her time just for that? The man interrupted, disappointed at having snuffed his cigar, but the bird continued to speak. The target can use illusions and uses strange terms like jebaited. The man froze in his place before he slowly turned to look at the bird with wide eyes. The hell? The man quickly shook his head and patted his cheeks before gulping down a shot and penning a letter. After all the infiltrating we did on our own strength, we finally have some results. Amelia will be happy to finally find information regarding him. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.